What's up, everybody? I am your host, a crazy gaslighting foster mom who thinks bringing someone back from the dead is gonna work out totally fine. And that is my co-host, a demonically possessed little boy who's got a serious appetite for knives, tables, and even rotten human flesh. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we look at a film that uses tragedy and emotional trauma as a storytelling weapon. Because apparently, we are continuing our dive into Australia's best horror films as we talk about the 2025 possession film Bring Her Back, written and directed by the Philippou Brothers. So, this was your pick for the week, and I gotta ask, are you purposely picking Australian horror films? Like, have you been sucked into the Down Under's version of what a horror film should be? Like, what's going on here?
Well, let me tell you, mate. Uh, yeah, they're just putting out bangers, man. I guess some of the other ones, like Lake Mungo was an old banger, but that one was up on the batting plate for a long time. Like that
Yeah.
one was ready to go for a while. Bring Her Back is something that it's been on my slate for a newer movie.
You
Like
actually mentioned it as we left the theater
Yeah,
last year.
yeah, I said we 100% gotta cover this. I think the only thing that we've covered, from last year prior to this was Black Phone 2. And if you remember, I got to my last 2 or 3 when we did our end of the year rankings, and I said, "These last 2 or 3 movies are all, like, right up there. Any of them could be 1, 2, or 3." And this was, I think, my number 2. And if I right now, after deep diving, man, I don't know, it would be close with Black Phone 2. And I know we did that deep dive, and I liked that movie even more after going back and looking at it in more detail. But this one, probably even more so. Not saying I like it overall even more so,
Well, they're very different movies.
but it increased how much I enjoyed it even more so, and
Yeah, I agree.
that was with it being ranked super high, and that's because, when you go back and watch it for a second time after knowing the story, there's so many things that stick out and, that you don't notice on your first watch because, you just don't know to look for those things, but it's every single thing, every single scene in this movie has something of importance or symbolism. It is so geniusly it blows my mind that these 2 brothers who are so young, that they're that capable of writing such a well-written story. Like, to write a movie where every scene has some reason or some connection is extremely, extremely impressive. And man, I really, really enjoyed this. Another cool aspect of this is another, and I didn't think about this before. This is one of those unique possession movies.
Yeah, it
Like,
definitely is.
this is one of those things where, we kinda get the moniker of, hating on possession movies, like,
Which is
they're
not true. We just don't like the ones that are all the same.
exactly,
The
exactly.
cut and paste possession movies.
Yeah, the Blumhouse, everything done the same way with the same shots, with the same story, with the same actors. Like, this is a unique way to write a possession movie, and, if you think about it, Talk to Me was one of those few movies that we could think of in recent time that's actually a possession movie that's very unique. The other one, Late Night with the Devil, isn't that an Australian?
Yes.
Yeah, Australia, man, they're keeping it up with the fucking bangers, and they know how to do possession movies.
Apparently, yeah, they've been doing a lot of really good stuff lately. And speaking of Australian horror films, I recently watched the movie Dangerous Animals, which he actually wrote and directed last year. And this was, of course, recommended by one of our favorite listeners, Flesh Suit Man, who has amazing taste in horror films. And I gotta say, I loved it. It was fun, interesting, it was unique. Um, man, like, the guy who played the main villain, Tucker, did an awesome job. But it's like a serial killer that mentally tortures his victims on his boat before feeding them to sharks while they're still alive. And when he does this, he actually like, films it. So he creates his own like blockbuster of death. I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you're looking for something unique, good, and not predictable.
See, you're pushing the Australian movies too.
Yeah, but we didn't
It's not
cover it.
just me. It's not just me. But yeah, I have not seen that movie. I wanna check it out because everything that guy has done that I've watched, Burns has done that I've
It's
watched,
good, yeah.
has been great, and, you know that I'm not really a big shark movie fan. I know that
Neither
this,
one of us
from what
are.
you said, is not, like, primarily based around sharks. It's just kind of a tool that's used. So, I'm very interested. I think Jaws ruined that for me because I might upset some
You're
people
gonna get a
here.
lot of
Yeah,
hate for
yeah,
that.
I'm going to, but I've never seen Jaws as a horror movie as much as a thriller.
It's very debatable.
And, it's just maybe that just turned me off on horror movies with sharks. I don't know,
Nah.
dangerous sea animals, but yeah, that one might break bounds.
Well, what's unique about that is the shark is it's not like a creature feature, a monster movie. The shark is like his murder weapon.
Yeah,
He's a serial killer,
yeah, so
and you
it
get to
sounds like,
see sharks literally jump out of the water and, like, rip people in half.
yeah, it sounds like it's not like just like one shark or the same sharks either. It
No.
sounds it's just whatever sharks are around.
Whatever shark shows up. But yeah, anyway, back to, the film we're talking about this week. So, for me personally, it did not grab me the way it did you the first time we saw it. I remember we went together, I believe it was opening night for this movie, and there were so many things that, like, I just missed, like, I didn't pick up on.
Yeah, I think you were tired.
Well,
I think it was a tired watch for you.
I recall, like, leaving the theater and telling you, like, "Did I miss some scenes?" Or, like, "What the fuck?"
And yeah,
And
as I was telling you, yes.
yeah, and I thinking back on the experience, I know that, we went after work, and I remember being so fucking tired that I started to catch myself, like, allowing my eyes to shut. You know, that whole, like, where you fall into the trap where you're like, "Oh, I just need to rest my eyes for a minute."
That was
It's
what
never a minute. It's
uh,
never a fucking minute.
that's what happened when we went and seen Nosferatu for me,
Yeah.
and, that's an awful movie to go into
Yeah,
tired too, because
definitely.
that one's, very atmospheric, but very slow. It's slow building, and man, I'm pretty sure I dozed for, like, a quarter of that movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
something similar happened to me. I don't think I ever actually fell asleep, but I think my brain checked out many, many times over and over again. I think it was just running, like, on backup power that night, but, I just didn't have the mental capacity to really gather the information and put the puzzle together. So I was super confused when we came out of the theater,
yeah,
but
yeah, I think, I remember specifically a big part of your confusion was with the ritual side of it, and
yes.
this is a movie that if you added up all of the tapes, the found footage tapes, the ritual tapes, is maybe 3 minutes of the movie if you compiled all the scenes together, but they are very important 3 minutes to piece together what is happening in the story. So I could see if you missed one of those, like 3 scenes, you would be pretty lost.
Yeah, I did rewatch it for the best of the year episode, and I liked it a lot better, and I picked up on a bunch of stuff that I found really interesting the second time around. And then, this was my 3rd time watching it and, doing the research and watching it again. I got some more stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. And I would go ahead and buckle in because I already know this is going to be a longer episode. There's a lot to talk about here. May even have to shift some information and discussions into an after show. But with that being said, are you ready to dive into Bring Her Back?
I am so ready.
All right, let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at grindhousehorrorpod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and you don't want us to suddenly die in the shower with our dicks out, give us a review. You know what's funny about that? That used to be somewhat of a fear of mine when I was younger.
Wow, to die in the shower or
well-
die and somebody finds you naked?
Well, when I was like 17 or 18, I was watching that show, A Thousand Ways to Die. And there were so many episodes where somebody just like up and died from some stupid medical shit. No one's all coming. And it would always be at the most inconvenient times. And I remember thinking about it while I was like taking a shit or a shower or something. And I was like, how fucking embarrassing would it be if I suddenly dropped dead like right here, and then like my family discovers me like butt ass naked, laying there with like a shit hanging out of my ass or something. And at some point, like I just totally forgot about that until I went to Iraq, and I was like shitting in a porta john one day, and a fucking rocket like flies over me, and the sirens start going off, people are yelling outside, and I'm just sitting there like, fuck, I'm gonna die in a porta potty in the middle of a shit with my pants down.
Did that cure your fear of
What?
that?
I just thought like,
You
what
just
a
had to face your fear of dying on the shitter?
well, I just was thinking about it. I was like, what a fucking legacy to leave behind.
Well, if
Yeah,
I
I don't
was to
know.
get
I haven't thought about it since then, but I was like, I can't leave in the middle of this shit. I gotta
Yeah, I mean,
finish.
that would be pretty bad. Like, if I was to get blown up, I would much rather it be in a bathroom on a regular toilet, because you
Oh, for
gotta think
sure.
a porta potty's
I'm
gonna have,
covered
like,
in
that blue shit
I'm gonna be
and
covered
other
in
people's
other people's
shit.
shit, yeah.
Yeah, that would be awful.
Those are the things that they don't put in the action military movies.
Yeah, all the people that's, like, covered in blue stuff and
Well
other people's shit,
well, the hard choice between, finishing the shit and possibly dying, or cutting the shit off early and getting to a bunker.
and then
That's a hard choice.
they definitely do not mention that to the families. They just do the old, "They
He
died
died
a
in the shitter.
hero."
Yeah, he definitely didn't die in a shitter.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I think you told me recently a lot of old people die on the shitter, which was news to
Very,
me.
very common, yeah.
But yeah, if I do ever die in the shower, I hope my dick's out, because, I just hope I never hit a point in my life where I have to shower with shorts on
Yeah,
for some
that's
reason.
not good.
That would be terrible.
All right, so Bring Her Back is a 2025 Australian supernatural horror film written and directed by Danny and Michael Philippou, with co-writing credits going to Bill Heisman. It stars Billy Barrett, Sora Wong, and Sally Hawkins, and follows the story of two step-siblings who find themselves orphaned and placed in the middle of an occult ritual by their new foster mother. It was produced by Causeway Films, released on May 29th of 2025, had a budget of $15 million and a box office of $39.1 million doll hairs. So, before we dive into the movie, let's talk a little bit about the creators behind it, Danny and Michael Philippou. So, Danny and Michael are identical twin brothers born and raised in Adelaide, Australia. And before they ever set foot on a film set, they were already internet famous as the creators of the YouTube channel Raka Raka, which specialized in comedy horror videos that racked up over 1.5 billion views and 6.7 million subscribers. And after the success of their YouTube channel, the brothers decided they wanted to take the next big step in their careers and make a full feature length film. And that film would be Talk to Me from 2022, which was, of course, produced by A24 and had major success, turning their $4.2 million budget into a $92 million box office. Whoa.
Yeah.
This effectively turned the brothers into one of the most in-demand horror directors in the world, seemingly overnight. If you would like to know more about that, definitely check out our episode on Talk to Me, where we really deep dive into how that movie got made, as well as some hidden details and stuff that you may have missed.
That was a good episode.
Was.
I remember we had some actual debates,
Especially the ending. Yep.
on a couple different spots, but yeah, the ending as well.
Mm-hmm. So after the massive success of Talk to Me, the brothers immediately signed another deal with A24 for a sequel, but they really wanted to do it right. So instead of diving right into it, they decided they wanted to take some time to really polish the story, and in the meantime, they would work on another film they had in mind, which would share the same universe of their first film. And that is how we ended up here at Bring Her Back. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but when we did the episode on Talk to Me, the brothers actually revealed that they had a whole prequel and sequel written before they even finished filming Talk to Me, which is really awesome and really smart. They already had written this whole universe for this story, as well as the rules and history of this embalmed hand, which is that's really refreshing because now we know there isn't going to be continuity issues with their stories or anything quickly thrown together that doesn't match up with the original film. Looking at you, big major horror franchises.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge, man. I hope that they maintain the rights to that because
Yeah.
that is huge for continuity purposes. Because if you look at Halloween and Friday the 13th, they were independent films, and they end up selling away the rights in full, and they lost all the continuity that
Yep.
they had. I do know that, and I don't know if this connects to that, but um, the brothers were talking about in the making of for this movie that when they did Talk to Me, they were all laughing and excited on set, yeah, we're doing an A24 movie because they had distribution through A24. But this time they were super nervous. They said the most nervous day on set was the very first thing they filmed. And it was because they were this time A24 is financially backing
Yeah.
us,
They
which was new for A24 at the time too. I
Well,
mean,
you-
that's just recent before they just did distribution.
Well, when they did Talk to Me, I don't know if you remember, but they got the first time director's grant from I think it's Screen One Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so which we just talked about for Lake Mungo. But they didn't get a free $1 million on their second one.
No.
So but yeah, fun fact here. So both the Talk to Me and Bring Her Back scripts were actually written at the same time. And during the development process for Talk to Me, characters were literally swapped back and forth between the two scripts until they felt these stories were locked in. So in a very real sense, these two films were born together, with the brothers describing Bring Her Back as a spiritual successor to Talk to Me rather than a sequel, with both films exploring similar themes of grief, possession, and the desperate lengths people will go when they cannot accept loss. Also, the Philippou brothers had originally agreed to film the Street Fighter movie right after Talk to Me, but suddenly dropped out in order to make this movie. And when asked about it, Danny said that they were so inspired by the old school Psycho Biddy films, aka hagsploitation. They just had to work on Bring Her Back Next. And if you're unfamiliar with hagsploitation slash psycho biddy movies, they're films like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and Straight Jacket, which are essentially films centered around an older woman who goes violently unhinged.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. One of the just off the wall comparisons that hit me when I was watching this movie, and I say off the wall because they are completely different movies with just a completely different tone and atmosphere, but it was Misery, and
I thought about the
it it
performances
was
were
the
similar.
performance.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I will say, and this is a strong statement, but the performance of Sally Hawkins as Laura is up there with Kathy Bates from
Agree.
Misery.
Agreed. I don't think it's quite as good, but it's maybe one step under.
I would think that they're both 10 out of 10.
They're both really good. What's funny is like the film that I connected to when I was watching it this week was actually um Pet Cemetery.
Hmm.
It's very much a Pet Cemetery movie. Sometimes Dead is better.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a lot of similarities.
I could see some similarities there with the,
They're both
with Raising the Dead.
parents that can't,
Um,
accept the death of their child and decide to use a supernatural force to bring them back, which of course doesn't go well.
yeah, yeah, and seeing the way grief and tragedy can completely alter the mind, and that's why I used Kathy Bates's performance. Is why it stuck out as a comparison because, Misery is really, the descent of somebody who is, mentally off and their just descent into insanity as the film goes on. And this is completely that, but not somebody with mental illness, somebody who is broken by tragedy, which I think adds a whole nother layer to the story that this was a perfectly normal, really, high functioning, very professional person who was just absolutely fucking
Demolished.
destroyed.
Yeah.
And by the end of the movie, we get just full blown, just she's lost her fucking mind.
Yep. So once they had this massive success with their first movie, they officially start work on their second. And during the writing of Bring Her Back, two devastating events hit the Philippou brothers like a ton of bricks, which would eventually completely change the film from their original vision. First, a very close, lifelong family friend died suddenly at the age of 23 while the brothers were deep in pre production for the film. And second, which is the biggest event that would end up shaping the whole entire story, was when their cousin unfortunately lost her 2-year-old child to a medical event. And rather than pause production to process any of this horrible news, the brothers decided to pour all of that raw, unprocessed grief directly into the script, which gave the movie a completely different feel. According to Danny Philippou, scenes that were originally designed to be scary suddenly morphed into devastation and despair because of, what they were going through in their real lives. And when it comes to one of our main characters, Laura, we find out that she was the most affected by those conversations when talking about grief and loss happening in real time while shooting was taking place, which is honestly kind of the backbone of this movie. Laura's character and this descent into madness, like she is the bad guy. But when you find out, what's going on towards the end, like you do feel for her in some ways. Like you you don't support what she's doing, but you understand how she's been driven to this point.
Well, yeah, you see that what she's doing is awful and it's not acceptable, but it's extreme mental illness derived by a personal tragedy
Mhm.
and her inability to handle it. Like her brain breaks. Like something so dramatic and them losing close friends and a you said it was a family member?
It was their cousin's 2-year-old, daughter, I believe.
Yeah,
So a child.
so seeing that with her character essentially, dealing with the trauma of loss and a child at that, and it just breaking your brain. And as a parent, I pray to God I never have to deal with anything like that. But I can see where
Yeah.
she's coming from, not what she's doing, but how something that awful could break your brain.
Yep. So now that we've talked about how this film was developed, let's move on and talk about some casting real quick. Specifically with two of our main characters here, Laura and Piper. So Laura is played by Academy Award nominated actress Sally Hawkins, who is best known for her Oscar nominated performance in The Shape of Water. And according to Hawkins, she immediately felt a connection with the project, seeing it as a deeply human, emotional drama about grief rather than just another horror film. She also stated that for her personally, the writing of the script felt incredibly real and grounded. Not to mention, she was really excited about exploring the character who is indeed the villain, but instead of just seeing her as this bad guy, Hawkins viewed her as a loving mother who was fundamentally broken by the trauma of suddenly losing a child, which allowed her to then use Laura's overwhelming pain as her emotional anchor, giving her the ability to explore the character's descent into madness. And when asked about Hawkins' performance, Danny Philippou said that he was in awe of her, describing her as genuinely incredible and in certain scenes, genuinely terrifying. I think we can all agree Sally Hawkins makes this movie.
Yeah, yeah. All the acting is incredible across the board. Our three main characters, Sally Hawkins as Laura, Piper, and Andy, all three of those are incredible characters, but Sally Hawkins definitely just on another level. And they said that they were like super shocked when she took
Yeah,
this role, and it's crazy. And when I say they're so young, they're younger than us, that they were able to write something so deep with so much meaning,
agree.
because they very much like downplay it, like, well, yeah, I wouldn't say that, we're two of the dumbest people that you'll meet. But in reality, to come up with a script like this, man, it's just they really have a
A talent, yeah.
extreme talent for horror and how to write a really good horror movie, but a really deep movie in general. Like, not if you take the horror out of it, the story is really amazing.
So the next actor I want to talk about real quick is Sora Wong, who plays Piper, and I was very surprised to find out that she had zero professional acting experience before being cast in this film. According to Wong, her mother actually accidentally came across a casting call on Facebook that was specifically looking for a visually impaired young girl to fill the role. And just like her character in the movie, Wong was born with two conditions that I am not going to try to pronounce, which left her completely blind in her left eye and very weak vision in her right. And after her mother stumbles across this post, she asks her daughter about it, and Wong immediately expressed interest in trying out for the part. They then went to the audition, and the Philippou brothers immediately thought she was perfect for the role of Piper. She does a very good job in this, so shout out to her, Sally Hawkins, and Billy Barat, who plays Andy. They're all really good in this movie. They do a fantastic job bringing this to life.
Yeah, I was gonna. I'm glad you covered Piper's character, because I actually did, when I was on IMDb, see that she was last, although she was a main character and she didn't have a picture up there. So I assume she didn't have a whole lot of background. So I was wondering
None.
how she got even interested
Yeah.
in doing this.
So once the deal was signed with A24 and the cast and crew were gathered, production on Bring Her Back began in June of 2024, with filming taking place in Lightsview, Southern Australia, and the Philippou Brothers' hometown of Adelaide, Australia, with production wrapping up after just 41 days on location. Fun fact, the film was actually shot by cinematographer Aaron Miliski, who also shot Talk to Me, which is why they look and feel so similar. According to an Instagram post, the brothers described the shoot as a rough, tough, sloggy production because, remember, they're going through some serious personal grief during filming. So, needless to say, it wasn't anything like the studio was doing or the cast and crew. It was just, hard to make a movie about emotional trauma while going through emotional trauma. But they did pull it off.
Oh, yeah, and I'm not surprised to hear that they had the same cinematographer because while you were mentioning that Pet Sematary, I had a really hard time comparing this movie as far as feel because it is extremely dark and atmospheric,
Yeah.
and the closest thing I could come up to were the darker parts of Talk to Me.
Yeah.
So
Also, a lot of rain. A
yeah,
lot of
so
rain in both movies.
it definitely makes sense that
They
they had the same guy.
use rain to very much establish a mood
Yeah.
in both movies.
Yeah, that's something that's actually, a big thing in Japanese horror.
Mhm. So, once post-production was completed, the film got a special one-time screening at the Adelaide Film Festival on March 26th of 2025 before being released in theaters the following day in the US. It was released in Australia on the 29th and finally the UK on August 1st. Not sure why it took so long for the UK release. It's kind of weird. It's like a full 3 months later. If you know why, let us know. But yeah, I couldn't find out why the hell it took so long to release over there.
It was that damn taxation without representation.
Yeah, it was King George, bastard. So in the U.S., the film was expected to gross around 5 to 7 million in its opening weekend, making 3.1 million on its opening day, and finishing out with a total first weekend earnings of $7.1 million. So a tad bit more money than they were actually expecting. After around 2 months or so of being in theaters, the film managed to rake in 39.1 million at the box office. So not quite, doing what Talk to Me did. I believe Talk to Me made like 90 something million, but still turning a nice profit considering the $15 million budget. But most reviews for the film from both audience members and critics were positive, with an average rating of 7.6 out of 10, leading to an 80% overall positive score, with 57% of those polled saying they would definitely recommend the film to friends or family. So, Bring Her Back was liked by critics and audiences. And what's really interesting about that is, despite Australia's low interest in horror movies, apparently, it managed to sweep the board at the 15th Annual Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Awards, winning a total of 9 out of the 15 film awards for that year.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was their countries being really proud of the success of Talk to Me and really putting Australian film on the map. Because to make almost $100 million in the theaters is insane. Like, that's huge for any movie.
Yeah.
So for out of all the Australian horror movies we've covered, none of them have done anything like that in the box office. Most of them did nothing.
Some of them didn't even get to
Yeah.
the box office.
Yeah, so for, two famous YouTubers to go into their very first movie and to literally smash box office records, yeah, I would imagine some of that was the kinda payback for that original Talk to Me, that debut.
So, once its theater run was completed, the film hit streaming just in time for Halloween on October 3rd of 2025, with the 4K Blu-ray hitting shelves on August 19th of that same year. A 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray was released in an exclusive A24 slipcase and a digipack containing our personal favorite collectible art cards. I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, but I finally saw somebody on the physical media subreddit make a post asking, what the fuck am I supposed to do with art cards and why do they keep including them? So
Yeah.
it wasn't just us, because everybody in the comment section were like, yeah, it's just so they could, justify the money they're charging you by adding something that's cheap.
Well, I discovered a lot of that. A lot of times the art card stuff is the images that were pulled from the press kits, and that's kinda cool which they don't tell you that. And I know that's probably not every set of art cards, but it is cool to have, like, the press kit photos that were sent out, and because press kits come with a little stack of photos
Yeah.
for
Press.
magazines to use
Mhm.
and stuff, so yeah, but outside of that, I'm still waiting for all the complaints about A24's fucking paper boxes that you have
Yeah.
to buy the movies in. That's
Yeah.
my biggest
Their
complaint.
cases suck.
Like, I'm happy they put art cards in since I paid all this money for a fucking cardboard box.
Yeah.
Like, as a movie collector, I have to put that in a steelbook protector because everybody knows cardboard just being on
It's
the movie
thin too.
shelf, yeah, it's gonna deteriorate.
Yeah. Alright, so ratings. Rotten Tom, 89%. Wow. Critics really like this one.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can see why. It's a very, deep, meaningful movie.
IMDb 7.1 out of 10. Letterbox 3.7 out of 5. I don't know what Letterbox is smoking. And the Google average audience rating is also a 3.7 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming on the HBO Max add-on on Hulu, YouTube, Sling TV, Amazon Prime, and you can rent it on Google, Fandango at Home, and Apple TV for $5.99. Are you ready to dive into the plot of Bring Her Back?
I am ready.
All right, so we start out with a quick message on the screen informing us that this is not a cult, as well as a mix of grainy VHS footage and professional digital video footage, as we then hear a Russian woman begin to speak as we see this ritual begin. And during this intro, we see a few important things here. One is a possessed looking woman kneeling in the middle of a painted circle, a naked man soothing her by rubbing her head, another woman laying dead on the floor, and finally, a third woman with a rope around her neck being strangled until she eventually dies. But before we get to see what is actually going on here, we immediately cut to a young Asian girl named Piper. And as we are about to learn, Piper is almost completely blind. And the reason why is because she was born with a condition that has left her completely blind in her left eye with very limited vision in her right, exactly like the actress who plays her. So as she attempts to make some friends with these three similarly aged girls, we meet our second main character, Andy, who is a 17-year-old, slightly guarded young man who is not necessarily unfriendly, but keeps a certain distance from the world. You know, kind of like someone who has been let down enough times that keeping people at arm's length has become second nature. He is smart, capable, and fiercely protective of exactly one person in his life, and that person is his stepsister, Piper. Now, Piper here is kind of the opposite of Andy. She's around 14, 13 or 14, something like that. She's very quiet and polite, but at the same time, unlike her brother, she is very naive to the harshness of the world, and she loves to be social. Now, Andy and Piper are not blood related if you can't tell. Their parents married and blended their family years before, and what should have been an awkward arrangement has instead produced this bond between the two of them that is about to be the most important thing in either one of their lives. Because you see, Andy looks after Piper with a fierceness that goes beyond brotherly obligation, and Piper grounds Andy in a way that nothing else does. So in other words, they are very close. They have a very special bond between them. So after the failed attempt to make friends at the bus stop, we immediately jump ahead about an hour where we see Piper run and inform Andy that their father, Phil, has been in the shower for a very long time and hasn't answered any of her calls to the door, leading her to suspect something is very wrong. And after he jimmies the door open with a knife, he finds that Piper's concerns are very correct. Because right as the door swings open, Andy sees the room is full of steam, the glass shower door is wide open, and Phil is laying there dead after collapsing and hitting his head badly on the ground. I was surprised to see a bit of a dick shot this early on.
That is A24.
That is, well, it's actually funny you say that because the timestamp is exactly 420.
That's funny. A24 likes some dicks.
Yeah, and 420.
Yeah, they do not, they
Shy away from the cock.
I think that they maybe see the, horror movie industry as very heavy on the tits,
Yeah,
not as much on the nuts,
yeah.
and, they are trying to even the playing field out by giving us
Putting
as many balls as possible.
balls and dicks from
Yeah.
A24. Uh,
Well, if you remember, the very creepy, tape in the very beginning also has dicks, so this
yes.
isn't the first dick.
Yeah, and
We're
this is
we're 420 in, and
we're
we're like 5 dicks in.
we're at least 3 dicks in, and we haven't even hit the 5-minute mark yet.
Yeah, that's normally of when I'm like, "Okay, it's probably a good time to, turn this off," but, you know, considering the Philippou Brothers did this one, that's how I'll always remember their name. I'll never fuck it up again since we
Yeah.
made that joke. Yeah, since this is their movie, yeah, I wasn't walking out of the theater.
Well, from what I remember, there's no more dicks after this, so it's kind of like a concentration of dicks in the very beginning.
Get all the dicks out of the
Out of the way
way,
now.
all the dicks,
It's
and
your dick quota.
there's not even any tits to cancel out the dicks.
Now,
So it's
it's
like
dick heavy.
not even like saggy witch tits or anything. That's another A24 thing. So
Old woman boobs and
yeah.
dicks.
Yeah, just none of those, not even, like, at least, like, 2 saggy tits will at least cancel out, like, half a dick, but no, not a single tit, 3 dicks, but it's gonna take a lot.
A lot of rain, though.
It's gonna take a lot more than that to scare me off from a Philippou movie.
So, needless to say, Andy suddenly finding their father dead on the floor is extremely traumatic for the 17-year-old, leaving him speechless as Piper, who is blind, screams for her brother to tell her what the fuck is going on with Phil. And a little while later, we see the coroner's office wheeling the body out of the house, where we then hear Piper talking about how Phil very recently had cancer, but despite the events of the past year or so, he had just finished up his chemo treatments and was supposed to be in the clear. I do want to bring up real quick. So you remember how aggravated like Andy gets when they're trying to get the body out of the door and the wheels like catching the door frame or something? Well, I think that this was definitely put in there on purpose because I think that it foreshadows the rest of the film, and I'll explain that. So the reason that they put this in there is because as Phil's body leaves the house for the final time, it symbolizes a major life transition beginning for both Andy and Piper. And this major transition is very much like, how they're trying to get Phil's corpse out of the house. It's not going smooth. And
No.
it's telling us that they are facing some unforeseen challenges up ahead, just like this fucking gurney that's trying to get their dad out of here. So, a more simple way is like it's a symbolic sign of the problems to come.
Yeah, it's also, we noticed that we get a major dose of trauma and grief due to the loss of a family member, very similar to Talk to Me.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
get that very early on in both films.
Yep.
So it seems to be kind of a staple.
Yeah, and that makes sense too because they wrote both movies together. Shit, they even exchanged characters at some point, and they had made a comment many times that this was not a sequel to Talk to Me, but it was like a successor. Like it is to run, next to Talk to Me as events. I did actually see something where they connected it by saying that the house that Laura lives in is the same street that I can't remember if it's the main girl from Talk to Me or her friend. Either
Mm.
way, they have these events happen on the same street. And one of the Philippou brothers says, the moral of the story is don't fucking move to that street.
Well, apparently, and I didn't have time to go back and find out exactly where it is, but apparently one of the people, I don't know if it's the dead people in the tapes, is one of the dead people who were in to talk to me,
Yeah.
which was really weird because I thought those people died from the hand, but then I realized, no, I guess you can call on spirits and they'll take the form of like a loved one. So yeah, that it connects in that way. But in one way I definitely know it connects is if you remember, I covered it on the news when this movie was first announced and being made. They had released a website
Yeah,
where you
yeah.
could go on there and like find a bunch of I think it had a bunch of the pictures, it had a lot of the occult side of the stuff, like, it was, like, almost like a police file of, like,
Well,
occult.
it's a dark web auction site.
Okay, yeah, that's what it
Yeah,
is,
'cause,
and
it's gonna come into play big time later on.
yeah,
But
yeah, I do remember, though, on that website, "Talk to Me" is directly on that website, like, 2 of the
yeah.
files connect directly to "Talk to Me."
Yeah, I have something really cool and a theory that I came up with using this website, and we'll talk about it a bunch later when we get to that part. I'm actually really excited to to run it past you and see what you think. So, in the immediate aftermath of Phil's death, the government machine, known as Protective Child Services, quickly moves forward with finding both minors a place to stay. And this is where we meet Andy and Piper's social worker, Wendy, who is a very pleasant, jolly older lady that is nearing the end of her long career at the agency. It's kind of odd, though. Apparently Phil has no blood relatives that can legally take custody of these two. Not a single family member in sight.
Yeah,
And did it say what happened to the mom? I don't think it ever says anything where the mom is.
I don't think when he's touching on the backstory, he really talks about the mom. I just know he mentions that they split up, and that it wasn't until his dad remarried that he kind of like he had gotten the family he always
Yeah,
wanted.
but where is Piper's mom? She
Um,
could take custody of Piper. She obviously has to be dead.
yeah, she's clearly not in the picture because foster care is taking over.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
it's
saying.
just
Like, there's nobody?
and
Nobody?
leave it up to the foster care system to try to separate two siblings that one of them has a ailment such as
Like a
a
disability.
very major ailment and disability and being blind and just suffered the most traumatic thing that you could possibly suffer as a kid, seeing or finding your parent dead and you want to separate them. Like,
Yeah, this is a
and,
horrible idea.
and I don't know if this is similar. I obviously it's similar in Australia for them to put this in here, but this is something that is a problem in the U.S. as well, where our foster care system does fucked up shit like this all the fucking time.
Shitty government is no country's immune to it. So anyway, as we cut to Andy and Piper sitting in Wendy's office discussing what is going to happen, we find out that the state plans on splitting them up pretty much right now. As Wendy then explains that Andy, because of his age, is being sent to a state-run supervised unit until he turns 18 in a couple months, and Piper is being sent to a foster mother's house named Laura. So, needless to say, both kids are pissed about this, with Andy immediately arguing that Piper can just stay with him and he will take care of her, which is a better plan than sending her to go live with a stranger. But Wendy finally realizes that this positive attitude that because she's trying to talk them into it, like with a smile on her face, like they're gonna fucking be happy about this. She finally realizes, like, this is not gonna work here. And she immediately drops that, like, jolly facade when she informs Andy that unfortunately that is not possible right now, and his only option is to apply for legal guardianship when he turns 18. In 3 fucking months. This is the exact needless government bureaucracy that gives us all headaches when we got to deal with the government. Like, what difference is fucking 12 weeks gonna make in Piper's life?
Yeah,
None.
it well, it could make a major
Could be bad,
bad. Yeah,
but it's not gonna be beneficial.
well, one problem that we have in the foster system here in the US that I don't know if Australia has this issue, but a lot of
Catholic
people
priests.
have started, those are issues all over the world. That's a world issue. The government pays people who foster children, and
Becomes a job.
it was a great idea to start with, but then a bunch of fucking shit people decide to take advantage of this and essentially take in as many foster kids as they can and get paid a bunch of money from the government and squish all these kids in the same room and treat them like shit. And they're generally super strict.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't the case in this movie, but 3 months in that situation can really, really lead to some negative impacts.
Yeah, definitely. So once Wendy shoots that idea down, Piper then speaks up asking why can't Andy just come stay with her at Laura's house, especially considering he would only be there for 3 months. But Wendy then breaks the bad news to the little girl that Laura doesn't want Andy to come along because she has had issues with troubled teenage boys in the past. The problem here is Piper doesn't understand why Andy is being considered trouble, which leads to Andy having to tell his little sister that when he was around 8 years old, he got into some serious trouble with the authorities, which is why Laura doesn't want him there. And this news shocks Piper, leaving her speechless because she had absolutely no idea about this. But before she can get the details, Andy ends the conversation by looking at Wendy and very nicely asking if she can please talk to Laura about keeping them together, to which Wendy agrees. So I do want to point out, something that becomes very important in this movie. When Wendy mentions Andy being considered trouble, Piper looks over at him and, says the word grapefruit, which is something that we are going to see throughout this movie. And I want to explain the meaning behind that real quick. So grapefruit is a secret code word between Andy and Piper that only they know. And when one of them says it to the other, it means you need to be 100% truthful right now and tell me what is going on. No bullshit, no half truths. And what's interesting about this is it wasn't something the Philippou brothers thought up. In reality, it is something that co-writer Bill Heisman actually uses with his real life partner when he needs 100% honesty. While writing the story, he added this into the dialogue and the two brothers loved it. According to them, they felt that it made Andy and Piper's relationship feel much more textured and authentic, as well as showing us, the audience, how close these two really are. Another really interesting thing about this is Andy and Piper were in many ways based off of two real lifelong friends of the directors. And the story goes that one of the friends has had to constantly describe and visually map out the world around them for his blind little sister,
Hmm.
which was really cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That answers part of that question of how they wrote this, so realistically, like so good. Like these are good, deep characters.
Yeah, we definitely immediately see that Andy feels like a major devotion and responsibility. I wouldn't even call it responsibility because he doesn't see it as a responsibility.
It's like a duty,
It's a duty to
it's a
him,
calling.
um, to look out for Piper, and
Hmm.
he puts her over anything else. Like that is his main focus, and also there is parts of that like Piper sees him as a hero. That this is her heroic brother that has, in her eyes, never done any wrong. I
Yeah,
shouldn't say
yeah.
in her eyes,
This is, yeah,
in her
definitely.
head,
Oh,
considering
yeah,
she's
good point.
blind. But
In her mental eyes.
yeah, she can't see. So there's been a lot of things in their personal life that we learn later that has kind of been hidden from her, and this is why she is very shocked. Whenever
She's very naive to negativity in the world. Even if it's right in her own house, she still
y-
doesn't know.
yeah, there was things that took place before she could remember when she was so young, and considering they don't have any other family members that are really close, Andy is pretty much the only one there to tell her those things, and there's certain parts like his, getting in trouble that he's obviously kept away from her, which is a very big surprise to her. She sees him as somebody who's never done any wrong.
Well, they have to have a really they have a very unique relationship because when you think about it, Andy is her eyes. Andy is, spent thousands and thousands of hours just describing stuff to her. And she depends, like, she has to fully trust him in every scenario they're in because he is her eyes. He is giving her the information that our eyes give us to, keep us from stepping in a fucking a manhole that doesn't have a cover on it and dying or something. And that creates a bond that, no siblings can really replicate. Like us, we're close, but I've never had to be your fucking senses.
Well
It's very different. Like, that's a very unique, close relationship.
well, I think one thing that's not super obvious right now that's really important to point out is exactly what you were saying, that, Andy is Piper's eyes, but Andy needs Piper as much as she needs him because Piper is Andy's compassion. It's what keeps him grounded. It's what's kept him out of trouble. And
Keeps him focused.
I think he needs her just as much as she needs him.
100%. Yeah. He is literally turning 18, and the thing that he's trying to focus on and figure out is how to get custody of his sister and raise her, not, college or taking a year off and doing whatever you want. What a lot of people do, spring break in Cancun. He is already like 30.
Yeah, it's not even like, how am I going to take care of her? It's not a question to him.
How am I going to convince the state I can take care of her?
Yeah.
So after the house is cleaned out, we then see Andy and Piper head to Laura's house where they meet the energetic, joyful woman for the first time. And immediately we notice just how far from the city this place is, meaning Piper and Andy had been completely ripped away from their previous life that they had built with their father. And it's going to be hard to get some help when things go sideways here. One quick thing I want to point out, while walking down the driveway, we get our first shot of a perfect circle, which becomes a reoccurring symbol throughout this movie.
Yes, yes, there's a ton of symbolism in this movie, and two of them are very shape driven, and we're gonna get a lot of circles that are super important and triangles, and we're about to get the first triangle as well.
So let's talk about Laura real quick. Laura is a woman in her late 40s or maybe early 50s, lots of excitement and energy. She has warm eyes and a gentle manner, which at first glance makes her seem calm, maternal, and even safe. But spoiler alert, she's not. She lives in a large house on the outskirts of the city, set far back from the road, where it also is surrounded by lots of tall trees, giving her backyard plenty of privacy. Laura immediately greets Andy and Piper with this cheerful warmth and excitement that is a bit overwhelming, but at the same time makes you feel welcome in her home. And even though she comes off as very pleasant here, it is pretty quickly obvious that she is very excited about Piper being here, but definitely doesn't feel the same way about Andy. The scene where she has Piper pet the stuffed dog?
Mhm.
Well, I came across something really interesting, like an interesting theory. Apparently, she has Piper pet the dog because she knows on paper what Piper's condition is and that it allows her to somewhat see. Like, she's not 100% blind. So Laura uses this trick with the dog to actually gauge how blind Piper really is, which would become very important later on when she's trying to do this ritual.
Yeah, yeah, that would make sense 'cause, and I'll point out each one of them that I came across, but we find out that everything Laura does is extremely calculated,
Yeah.
and this is something that you don't get on your first watch, and then once you know the story and you go back and watch it, it's almost mind-blowing how calculated it makes the movie even more scary.
Same thing with her dialogue.
Yeah, yeah. Literally every decision she makes is literally calculated and it has a reason, and even the smallest things come up later. And another thing with the stuffed dog, that's another um it's a very like quirky
Yeah.
personality. When the first time you watch
Oh,
this,
she's weird,
yeah,
but fun weird.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
The first time you watch this movie, I thought, that's weird. That's kind of a red flag, but she has that quirky
Mhm.
personality. But this is major, major foreshadowing as it's highlighting her struggles with death and letting go.
So, after a brief introduction, Andy notices some important details around the living room, like how the edges of the carpet are taped to the floor to prevent tripping, something that is pretty consistent in many blind people's homes. So, Andy then brings this up to Laura, who informs him that her own daughter was blind, and unfortunately, her own blindness is what led to her falling in the pool a few months ago, which led to her dying. This conversation quickly gets interrupted by a phone call, and while Laura talks to Wendy about the kids, Andy ventures into the backyard where he immediately spots a big empty pool with another partially clothed young boy standing in the middle of it, fighting with a cat, whose name is Junkman, by the way. The cat, not the kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is a
You
weird,
you you
weird name for a cat.
you would think this kid might be Junk Man
He could
if you look
also
at
be
him.
Junkman.
Yeah, but the triangle pool is the first introduction to a triangle, which is also a big part of the symbolism in this movie. And apparently, they had to have this triangle shaped pool so much that
Custom
they
built it.
literally built it in
That's
his yard.
honestly what I thought when I seen the pool. I said,
Because who has triangle pool?
probably had that made for this movie because that pool makes no sense as a real pool in
Yeah,
any way, shape, or form.
yeah, and the triangle pool is kinda interesting with the whole triangle and the symbolism because out of all the symbolism in the movie, this is the hardest one to really pinpoint, and, the fact that the pool is triangle and she had it put in kind of, with timeline-wise, makes some of the theories impossible, so I did eventually track down the triangle meaning, and I'll touch on that later on.
So, not long after Andy spots this kid, Laura runs outside to take care of the situation, informing us that the other child is named Oliver, who requires special care and attention. And to make matters worse, he voluntarily became a mute after the death of Laura's daughter, Kathy. So, here's the thing about Oliver. To normal people like us and Andy, Oliver definitely seems to be mentally handicapped. Even though Andy spent about a total of 20 seconds around this kid, it's pretty obvious to him that there's something going on with him. And speaking of obvious, starting on the very first day of Piper and Andy living at Laura's house, we see that Laura is treating Andy very differently than the other two kids, doing stuff like repeatedly getting his name wrong, not telling him about the cat until it's too late, and using passive aggressiveness whenever he tries to talk to her. And after getting to know each other a bit, Laura shows them to their rooms and gives them some time to grab and unpack their things. And on the surface, she seems like she's exactly the kind of person that the system hopes to find when it comes to a foster parent. But there is something lurking underneath that fake, joyful personality, which we kind of get a glimpse of when she's talking to Andy. But there's also something a bit strange when it comes to the way Laura looks at Piper, especially when Piper's not facing in Laura's direction. It's almost like she can see something in Piper that nobody else can see, and Andy is starting to notice this, but he kind of chalks this up to her weird, quirky personality that we were just talking about. And there's also another really big thing that Laura begins using as a weapon against Andy. And it's not super obvious right off the bat. It's not even something that's really obvious at all at first, but it is one of the most effective weapons in Laura's arsenal.
Yeah, she definitely treats him different, and this would be at first expected, knowing that she did not want an older kid with a troubled past in her house. She had already stated that he couldn't come there, and then they talked her into it. So she would already be on guard. But then it starts to get a little obvious. There's the name stuff, which we now know was done purposely. She's trying to almost get under his skin, feel him out a bit. I think that those were very much on
Testing the
purpose.
waters. Yeah.
And also, I just want to say with Ollie, man, we get introduced to this very, very strange kid that doesn't talk, who's standing in the middle of an empty pool, like, killing a cat. He's like of mice and men squeezing this cat's
Allegedly killing a
and
cat.
this cat's, like, scratching the fuck out of him and stuff, and he's just
No
does not give a
reaction.
fuck.
Yeah.
I would be if I was Andy, I would be scared that I was gonna have to spend the next 3 months
Yeah, I
in
wouldn't
this house.
wanna
Like,
live with that kid.
yeah, if this is day 1, like, that would legitimately scare me, and it would scare me more for my blind sister who
Yeah.
can't see what she's walking into.
Yep. So let me tell you about this very effective weapon Laura is using immediately. So Andy has been looking out for and taking care of his blind little sister for most of her life by this point. As a matter of fact, he has done it for so long, it has become a big part of their relationship. But here we see Laura keeps beating him to the punch when it comes to Piper. Every time Andy goes to warn Piper about a step or help her with her things, and even get her safely to her new bedroom, Laura is already on it, which immediately starts to make Andy feel useless. And the reason why this is so effective is because that tiny little feeling that he's experiencing right now, it's already burrowing into his brain, planting a devastating idea that will only grow in his mind as the next few days pass by, which will eventually cause Andy to feel like he has been replaced by Laura and Piper doesn't need him anymore, effectively driving a major wedge in Andy and Piper's very close relationship, which is exactly what Laura wants to happen.
Yeah, there's ways, many ways that she does this, and we'll point out as the plot goes on. But yeah, I think even more so than Andy, what Andy's feeling, it's Piper as well. She is slowly getting Piper comfortable and gaining her trust because she's going to need it with the plan that she has coming up. And we'll get to that, but it is extremely important for her to gain that trust and camaraderie very quickly.
Yeah, also, like, I don't know if you caught it because, like, I didn't catch it the first two times I seen the movie. I only noticed it this time around only because I had the captions on. But when he tries to warn Piper about like a step or something, Laura cuts him off, telling him she already told her, and then calls him old news Andy. What a bitch.
Yeah.
And this is like the first hour they're there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She's using that quirkiness to try to, like, write off. What she is doing is essentially pressing his buttons because she knows he has a troubled past. She doesn't know exactly, like, she's read his file, but she's never met him, so she's already pushing buttons, because she is gonna want a reaction out of him. She, with her plan that's brewing, has to get a reaction out of him. And this is the start of just slowly, I think, getting under his skin.
Well, yeah, because the worst thing you could do to Andy is take away the one person who needs him.
Yeah.
And it makes him feel worthless. His dad did that.
Well, I said Andy. Andy needs Piper as much as
Yes,
Piper needs
and this is
Andy.
the reason, and what she's doing right now on the very first day that they're there is planting that seed of, "Well, we don't really need you."
Yeah,
Um,
she does something else extremely important that I think you're about to get to in the plot here, but, yeah, that I think is extremely important to the story.
Also too, like, I've seen this movie 3 times now, and knowing the final outcome, it actually gets harder and harder to watch what Laura does to Andy in the coming days. Like, this kid has really had a shitty, hand at life so far, and she's just, he just lost his dad to it that, and then this woman comes in and is literally fucking making his life miserable in every way, shape, or form. Like, I really do feel bad watching Andy go through this whole entire movie. So the first few days in Laura's house go great for Piper and horrible for Andy, who we see is trying really hard to get along with Laura, who is definitely not making it easy. And speaking of Laura, we also start to notice that despite how she presents herself to the kids, she is very much still grieving the loss of her daughter, Kathy. Not to mention, there is definitely an odd relationship between her and Ollie. Not like a sexual thing, but more like an extreme closeness mixed with secrecy. And it kind of gives off the vibe like she is afraid for Ollie to be alone with Piper or Andy, like even for a second, because he might, slip up and tip them off that he is not who she says he is. It kinda leads to Laura having this almost nervous, panicked vibe that keeps revealing itself a little bit, under her, blanket personality she has. And, that tells us, the audience, like, she's up to no good. There's something not good going on with her and Ollie. So we then cut to late one night after everybody has went to bed. Laura quietly heads to her bedroom, places an old VHS tape into the VCR, and hits play. And what appears on the screen is the exact same found footage of what appears to be some kind of ritual involving a demonically possessed woman who this is the exact same footage we see at the beginning of the movie. And after she watches a bit of the tape, she opens a drawer which reveals tons of framed photos of Kathy that she obviously can't bear to leave hanging through the house. When we then cut to Andy, who gets out of bed after hearing a noise in the backyard, and when he peeks out his window, he spots Laura and Ollie sneaking into the shed next to the pool, which is very suspicious. I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but Laura's house coat, like she wears multiple times in the movie, is the same ugly yellow brownish color Maya's sweater is in Talk to Me.
Mm.
I don't know if that's on
Oh.
purpose or not, but it's a pretty big coincidence.
Well, she wears for half of the movie, she wears a purple cardigan when she's not wearing that yellow,
Which is,
and that is ends up being very, very important towards the end of the movie.
and I believe Maya's friend, the other character from Talk to Me, wears purple cardigan. So,
Which would make sense because purple is the color of depression.
mm. So after that weird shit, we then jump to the next morning where we see Andy has overslept. And after Laura wakes him up, he discovers that he has pissed himself while he was passed out, which is not something that he has ever done before, leaving him to feel very embarrassed despite no one but him knowing about it. We also get a shot from inside the washing machine as Andy washes his sheets, and I want to point out, thanks to the seal on the washer door, we get another image of that white circle that we saw in the ritual on the VHS tape. We also see it in Laura's front yard when Andy and Piper first arrive, and of course, it's around Laura's whole entire property, which has been hinted at, but not fully revealed yet. Another important detail that I haven't mentioned at all, but water. We also see water multiple times throughout the movie, which is, of course, on purpose. And I will talk about that. One of us will talk about it later on in the story.
Yeah. So prior to him getting up the next morning, there was something really important, and it is the phone, the phone scene. She goes in there. It's like it's day one, and she goes in the room and she essentially starts asking him questions about his phone, and he, like, what's he messaging about? Who is messaging? And, he very quickly kind of hides his phone, kind of crosses his arms, and she's like, I'm a therapist. People pay me to talk about these things. And she asks what's wrong, and he's like, Nothing, I'm fine." And she begins to break down his body language
Yep.
and literally breaks down his posture and body language to say that he's being extremely defensive and secretive. And this was very deliberate on Laura's behalf. Like, she is essentially telling him that not only is he not going to get privacy as far as his phone, because in the same scene, she picks up his phone and reads his messages, which leads to this very quick confrontation where she pretends that she was threatened.
Yeah.
And it's very much so, this is what she was trying to get out of him. But not only are you not gonna have any privacy when it comes to that, but I can almost, in a way, read your mind based off of being able to break down your body language. So you have no privacy, not even in your own mind, and that is going to be extremely psychologically, um, deteriorating to Andy as the movie continues. Also, a big part of that is when she first comes in the room, she says that I'm going to have to be given updates to social services about your sister. That is how she starts this whole phone conversation. And this is in her way saying, You can't hide anything from me, and you are at my mercy because what I report back to social services is going to depend on you keeping your sister. And that was a very deliberate way of her saying, Hey, I have all the control here. You can't hide anything, and you essentially have to bow to my every need. Like, you have to walk on eggshells because I can literally control whether you get your sister in 3 months or not.
Yeah. So, after washing his sheets, we then see Andy head to the bathroom and turn on the shower, but he does something really odd. He doesn't actually get in and instead decides to just sit there and watch the water run while staring at the shower, completely petrified. And while this is going on, we start to see him reliving the memory of him and Piper finding their dad. And a really important thing to note here is this isn't exactly what we saw earlier. The original scene where they find Phil is pretty short and it cuts off like right after they both run into the bathroom and they, see him dead on the floor. But this scene actually shows us the immediate aftermath of finding Phil dead. And what's really important about this is we actually see Piper yelling at Andy, trying to get him to snap out of it and help her, while she also attempts CPR on her dad. And what that tells us is Andy feels a lot of negative emotions when thinking about that event. He probably feels a lot of shame, guilt, and, even weakness when he remembers that. And in his mind, he's supposed to be like, this he's this fully grown young man. He's about to turn 18. He doesn't have disabilities unlike his sister. And like, he himself has taken up that role of protector when it comes to Piper. But yet when the time came for him to shield her from something traumatic, he froze up and caused her to have to step in and try to save their dad. And this, of course, leads to some serious PTSD triggers and some serious confident issues, especially considering how Laura is treating him right now, which makes things worse.
So I think that you're right there. I think he feels very much he let Piper down in this. Not that
And himself, too.
yeah,
Yeah.
not anything, because we learned that him and his dad's relationship was very negative, and I don't think it's anything about his dad. It's that he let Piper down. That Piper had to go through this trauma with no help, like he wasn't there. But I think one thing that you might have missed there that's very, very important is why he froze up. and they get into the abuse and the way his dad abused him and what he did. Not if it wasn't sexually, so I don't want to go there, but when he was physically abusing him, he would always turn the shower on and essentially scald him with hot water. And I think that that's part of
It is part
why
of, yeah.
whenever he goes into the bathroom with this hot water and it's steamy and his dad's laying there dead, it triggers those memories from his childhood. And that, along with the trauma of his dead dad being there, is what causes him to freeze up.
Yeah, so after that, we then cut to Phil's funeral where we immediately see Andy is having a very hard time, even looking at his dad's body in the casket. After Andy and Piper, say their goodbyes to their dad, we then see everybody start to clear out, except for one person, Laura, who then sneaks over to the casket and snips off a piece of Phil's hair, quickly placing it in her pocket before anybody sees her. And then she does one of the most evil, vile things a person can do to two grieving children at a funeral. She then walks over to Andy and Piper, calls out Andy for lying to Piper about how Phil looked in the casket, and even tries to force him to lean in and kiss his dead dad on the lips. What the fuck, lady? Like, that is beyond weird and quirky.
Yeah. So from the hair cutting scene, like we know on a first time watch, this was the moment I said, okay, quirkiness aside, this lady's up to no good.
Yep.
Like this is where you know as a viewer on your first watch that
Witchcraft.
there's no fucking no reason that somebody would go up to somebody they didn't know at their funeral and secretly snip off of some of their hair and save it. But then, yeah, going and calling him out was very, very calculated because she was standing there whenever Andy lies to Piper about their dad. Because Piper is asking, how does he look in the casket? And Andy, not wanting to look at his dead dad, said he looks great. And essentially, he's trying to comfort Piper. And whenever she goes and calls him out, this is her really first big wedge that she's driving. And this is showing Piper
Your brother's
that-
a liar.
that he will lie to you.
Yep.
Like grapefruit does not count for everything. You can't trust him all the time. He will lie. And she will use this to reference later on to, essentially say he's a liar. And then I think that kissing him, the Philippou brothers, apparently part of their Catholic religion that they grew up with in Australia. This is something that they grew up with. That was normal.
Oh,
At funerals, they would kiss.
not normal here.
Yeah, that they would kiss the dead, and it's something that I guess I do believe that they were really uncomfortable with as kids, seeing and being part of. So yeah, and coming from a culture where that's not normal, this is such a fucking uncomfortable scene. And Laura uses her psychiatric knowledge and abilities to essentially break him down in front of this casket and get him to kiss his dead dad. And it's very uncomfortable. It's very unnerving. And it's just one of those times in the movie that just kind of makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
So anyway, after the funeral, Andy and Piper are pretty bummed out, leading to Laura to attempt to cheer them up by asking, what do they want to do to celebrate their father's life? And after Andy makes a joke about wanting to get hammered, Laura quickly agrees, and the three of them then proceed to get plastered in the kitchen. And things almost seem like they're looking up. So after a couple hours of drinking, Piper ends up passing out, leaving a very drunk Andy alone with Laura, who is about to spring her trap. And despite his reluctance at first, Laura manages to get him to talk about his father's death, leading to a very emotional exchange between the two, where Laura then asks him about what he did to Piper when he was 8 years old. And according to Andy, he was physically and emotionally abused by his father, even to the point where he would drag Andy into the bathroom, cut on the shower to muffle the noise, and beat the shit out of him, which makes his fear of showers make a lot more sense. But the really important thing about Phil here is, despite how abusive he was to his son, he treated his stepdaughter Piper like gold, which of course caused a little 8-year-old Andy to resent her. And one day, after years of the abuse, the dam finally broke, leading to Andy punching his little blind sister in the face, injuring her very badly, which is why he has this juvenile record that was briefly mentioned earlier. Now, this stuff's very hard for Andy to talk about because we can see during this scene he is very much still resentful at his father for not only the abuse, but also how different he treated him and Piper. And it is at this point where Laura and us realize that Andy is not emotionally okay and really needs some help right now. But unfortunately, Laura sees this as just another opportunity to push Andy further and further over the edge, allowing her to separate him and Piper for good. It's also revealed here that Laura has been spiking Andy's protein shake with some kind of powerful sedative, which is why he keeps oversleeping. And the reason that she is doing this is because, as it turns out, Andy hasn't been pissing his pants at night. It's really been Laura dumping her piss on his clothes all along. That way, she can make him think that something's wrong with him and force him to get in the shower because she knows about his fear of the shower and Phil and all that, which is so fucked up, dude.
Yeah. The whole, like, drinking scene, you almost, like, the first time watch, you think, like, "Wow, this is kind of looking up a little bit." Maybe she really does feel bad for them and what they're going through. This is even highlighted by the first time we see any of real Laura, which is, I think she's caught off guard when Andy asks about her daughter, and that's the first time we really see her open up. And she actually talks about how at her daughter's funeral is essentially like she didn't want to leave. She couldn't leave. The thought of leaving her daughter here in the ground and her going back and sleeping in her bed.
We just talked about this with Lake Mungo.
Yeah.
Same
yeah,
conversation.
Yeah, she just could not bear that. I think that's the first time we've seen any of Laura,
Like the real Laura.
real Laura.
Mhm.
But you think, does she actually feel bad for them? So she gets this alcohol and lets him drink and have a night of just to kind of let loose. But no, in reality, we find out here she was using the alcohol to not only do continue the piss in the pants thing, but mainly to get him to open up about his childhood so she can in turn use that against him later. And also uses the pee thing not only to convince him that he's having issues, which he does think he's having issues, but she uses it on Piper as well. And it is the
Mhm.
start of her telling Piper,
She's like, there's something wrong with him.
yeah, he's going through some stuff, and then, she takes her for a ride and
Tells her who knows
Com-
what. Yeah.
completely does the 180 flip.
So after getting him drunk and drugging him, Laura also uses this time to go through his phone where she can read his messages and find out what he knows and what he suspects. She also goes through the gallery on his phone and deletes pictures that he has taken of Ollie because obviously Laura doesn't want who Ollie really is getting out to anybody, especially the authorities. So while deleting the pictures, Laura hears Ollie outside trying to murder and eat the cat again, prompting her to run out there and bring him back inside. And once they are both back in the house, Laura decides to give the boy a bath because he has all these like cuts and scratches on him from the cat. And this is where something very interesting happens. While washing his wounds, Laura gets to thinking, which leads to her getting real close to Ollie's face and asking if he is really in there and if this is supposed to be a part of a part of this thing that she's doing. But of course, Ollie has zero reaction to either one of her questions. This lack of response worries Laura even more, where we then see her get angry and say, "How can I believe you're in there if I can't see you?" And it's at this point where Laura gets her first real evidence that whatever she put in this little boy's body is indeed real. As we then immediately see Ollie turn his head to face her, and while looking her dead in the eyes, he begins to make things in the room start to vibrate. When out of nowhere, the sink cuts on, which, kind of startles her. And after she goes to cut it off, we start to hear cat sounds coming from a very creepy looking Ollie. But before Laura can even wrap her brain around what is going on here, the bathroom mirror suddenly shatters, effectively scaring the shit out of her. So there's a couple things here. One, did you catch the true reflection of the demon in the mirror before it shattered?
No, I did not.
It's very creepy looking, and I read that the Philippou Brothers actually designed it to resemble a Wendigo.
Huh.
It's got big horns and shit.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to point out is the creepy ass cat growling that we hear coming from Ollie here, which it's very unsettling. But the important thing about this scene is whatever this demon is that is possessing Ollie's body can vocally replicate and mimic the sound of the last living thing it fed on, which becomes really important. It doesn't have to kill it, it just has to eat a piece of its like flesh or body. And if you've paid close attention to the movie this far, you probably noticed that Laura is purposely not feeding Ollie, which also becomes important later on. Did you catch the cat walking across the couch on the next scene the next day, and it's leaving a blood trail? So
Yeah,
that
I did notice the blood.
telling
Yeah.
us that Ollie did, bite it. But
Yeah, this is definitely a big clue that makes more sense, and you kinda look back at
yeah,
this moment, and it's like, "Okay, that makes sense," as opposed to a really bad Foley artist.
yeah. The last thing that's really important here, when the mirror shatters, we get this quick 2-3 second shot of Laura looking stunned, like right after it breaks. Well, you may have noticed it, but because there's like a big piece in the middle of the mirror that's missing after it breaks, it causes the reflection of Laura's face to be also missing a big piece. And the reason that's put in there was to symbolize the big piece of Laura's soul that is now missing because of Kathy's death, which is why she's able to do all this horrible, shitty stuff to Andy and eventually Piper without ever being, overrun with guilt.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is it that? 'Cause that makes a lot of sense, or is it the big part of her that she is essentially has now given up by doing this ritual, like,
Well,
almost selling her soul?
that's a good point. Um, the theory I said is not my theory, it comes from the
Yeah,
brothers, but
yeah, well, yeah, I
but
trust the guys who wrote it.
either
I didn't
or
have
could work.
I didn't have a theory on it until I heard you
It's
mentioning it,
it could
because,
that fits in there just as good.
yeah, this whole scene, though, is very important, because it starts out with the water cutting on, and water has been, I mean, it's a very obvious
There's
symbolism
something,
throughout
yeah.
the movie. There's a
Mhm.
lot of imagery with water, but if you notice so far, everybody who's died has died around water.
Mhm.
Their dad died in the shower. Kathy, Laura's daughter, drowned in water. But we get a really, really cool shot the first time he pees to bed. Cinematography was through the washing machine of him
Yeah.
sitting there, and clearly they do it where the washer stops and all the water's running down.
And the circle's
But
right there.
but
Yeah.
water, most certainly, as this point in the movie, we don't know what the triangle or the circle actually represents, but you can get a good idea that water in some way represents death and trauma.
So the next morning, Andy wakes up again covered in drool and piss, just like every morning since he's been here. But this time he gets busted trying to sneak his sheets into the washer, where Laura calls him out in front of Piper and tells him that he needs to go take a shower. Not wanting to reveal his mental issue with the shower. He quickly agrees, but right before he goes to head up to the bathroom, Laura informs him that her and Piper are having a girls' day and going shopping, and she needs him to stay here and keep an eye on Ollie, who is currently locked in Laura's room. We then cut to a little while later where we see Laura and Piper head into town while Andy, after seeing his dead father in the bathroom again, decides he will just go out back and rinse off with the spigot. And while out there, he notices two really odd things. One, there is a padlock and a thick latch on the door to Laura's little gardening shed by the pool. And two, he spots Ollie watching him from Laura's bedroom window while acting a little strange, which prompts him to go check on the boy, and after jimmying his way into Laura's door, he brings Ollie down to the kitchen for some food. And this is where things really start to ramp up, because while trying to feed the kids some fruit, Ollie ends up getting a hold of the knife Andy used, and the very second Andy turns around to get a plate, he hears an absolutely awful sound coming from behind him. And when he spins around, he is shocked by what he sees, which is Ollie chewing on the knife blade, slicing his mouth flesh open over and over again, while also breaking chunks of his own teeth, which are now falling onto the countertop. So, needless to say, Andy immediately freaks out at the sight of this, but unlike what he did with Phil, he actually manages to jump into action, quickly wrestling the knife away from the boy, which results in his upper lip being completely sliced open. He then rushes him towards the car to take him to the nearest hospital, but this trip to the driveway is easier said than done, because as Andy and Ollie get closer and closer to that white line painted around the property, Ollie starts to fight and pull away, forcing Andy to physically pull him across, which then erupts into chaos as Ollie starts screaming at the top of his lungs as he collapses to the ground, bleeding badly from his face, and he begins to kick, scream, and flail. Now, Andy is really confused about what the hell's going on here, prompting him to try and calm the boy down enough to get him into the car, but things get even worse once Ollie starts coughing up bloody foam after being even more unresponsive. And it's at this point where Andy notices whatever is wrong with Ollie here seems to be transitioning away from medical and leaning more towards supernatural, leaving him a lot more confused. And just when Andy thinks things couldn't get worse, Ollie suddenly stops convulsing, relaxes his body, and looks right up at Andy and says, "Help me," which is the first time anybody has seen Ollie speak. This floors Andy, and he just looks down at the boy in shock when suddenly Laura's car comes screeching into the driveway, where she then jumps out of the car, screams at Andy, and quickly drags Ollie back over the white line and back towards the house, which, seems to calm things down a little bit. But after this happens, we then see Andy and Piper head inside, where Andy begins to have a panic attack. And while Piper attempts to help her brother, Laura takes Ollie back to her room, where she plays the VHS tape of the ritual, looking for some instruction on how to soothe the demon in Ollie's body. And while this is going on, two other things happen in the background. One, we see Ollie freaking out while repeatedly asking who Laura is and where he is, meaning this kid is not Ollie, and Laura hasn't been telling the truth at all about what's going on here. And two, while having this panic attack, Andy discovers a small piece of paper that Ollie wrote on. And as he holds it up to look at it, he notices it only says one word: bird.
Yeah, yeah, a lot going on here in a very short amount of time. I want to start out with the knife bite scene is fucking horrifying.
Awesome.
They
Horrifyingly awesome.
I think people are saying they're calling it the flossing scene or the knife floss scene.
Yeah, he does have it
Uh,
between two teeth at one point, yeah.
Yeah, it's done. It's one of those just things that's just super, super cringy and just makes you squirm in your fucking seat.
Teeth,
And
eyes, and fingernails always fuck people up.
yeah, and it's extremely effective. I feel so fucking bad for Andy here.
Yeah.
He has done everything right, and everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. He tries to feed this kid because he feels bad. The kid immediately bites down on a knife. He does the right thing in trying to rush the kid to the hospital. Then the kid collapses as soon as he like leaves this circle and starts like convulsing and shit. And he doesn't know it's a circle at the moment, but as soon as he crosses this line, but this is huge in that we see Ollie for the first time is a person.
Yeah.
Like he's the actual kid who can talk.
He's a real boy.
It seems that something has been possessing him and keeping him quiet, keeping him shut up. We see Laura freaking out, looking at these tapes, trying to fix and repossess this kid, which goes back to the bathroom scene. One of the biggest takeaways from the bathroom scene is that Laura completely has no idea what she's doing. She's clearly compiled these tapes, watched them, and is trying this for the first time. She doesn't have any practice in this. This is why she asked the question, essentially, is this working? Like, how the fuck am I supposed to know if this is
Yeah.
working if you're not talking to me? Which sets off all the events and the water and the glass breaking. But yeah, and we see that here when she's like, just panicking, trying to turn the music up so they don't hear Ollie freaking out, screaming for help, and watching the video to see what they do to fix this when it happens in the tapes. We also see something really big. I think it's the biggest thing out of everything, which is when Andy's having this panic attack. Piper comes up to him and says, Andy, it's okay. Laura is going to try to get you help. And this is very clear that Laura used this car ride to essentially convince Piper that Andy is not right in the head, something is wrong with him, and that he does not know what he's doing. He's not in control of
He's
himself.
not the normal
He's-
Andy you know and love.
The best way to put it, he's not safe to
Yeah.
be around, and we need to get him help, aka we need to get him out of this fucking house because you're not safe around him. And she has done a great job convincing Piper. And it's just really horrifying watching this movie to see how they wrote it, that Laura is so good at psychologically manipulating everybody and the whole situation around her. We follow Andy in everything that he does, and he has done nothing wrong, but she has convinced him that he is pissing himself, he is oversleeping, so he thinks that there's something wrong with him. She's convinced Piper that there's something wrong with him. Like, she has completely taken over this situation.
So once things died down a little bit, Andy and Piper go to check on Laura and Ollie, who are still in the room, because they think it's a little weird that Laura doesn't want to take him to get medical treatment for the giant slash that destroyed his upper lip. But Laura quickly turns the tables back on Andy, accusing him of breaking into her bedroom and hurting Ollie. And after chewing Andy out about the crazy shit that just happened, we see Laura feed Philip's hair to a now much more calmer Ollie, who appears to be back under the full possession of the demon. And just in case you didn't pick up on it, the demon can only continue to possess Ollie as long as he is inside this big-ass white circle that Laura painted around her whole property. The moment he crosses that line, the demon starts getting expelled from the body, which is exactly what was happening when he asked Andy for help right before, Laura shows up.
And
So
that leads to a super awesome cinematography shot above the house showing the entire house is encircled. But did you catch how she repossessed Ollie? When she's
No,
watching the videos, she's
doing the
essentially
circle
has
on
to
his head,
do
yeah,
the circle
yeah.
around his head. So this circle, it not only entraps whatever this entity is, but it also lures in whatever this entity is, and that's extremely important.
Yeah, it's a counterclockwise. It has to be a counterclockwise circle. So once Andy calms down some, he realizes he is somewhat covered in Ollie's blood, meaning he has to get over his fear and finally take a shower. But only seconds after getting in, he spots his decomposing father standing on the other side of the glass door, muttering, "She will die in the rain." which Andy immediately assumes is a warning about Piper's up-and-coming demise. After Zombie Phil passes this message on, he walks over towards the wall, giving an extremely frightened Andy a chance to run out of the room and escape. But on his second step towards the door, he slips on the wet floor, immediately falling and slamming his head into the hard bathroom floor, completely knocking him unconscious. And right as his vision starts to fade into blackness, the face of his dead father suddenly changes into the face of a possessed Ollie. Now, if this is a little confusing, let me remind you that in order for the demon that is possessing Ollie, possessing this kid, to mimic living things, all he has to do is eat a part of them. And we just saw Laura feed Ollie a chunk of Phil's hair, which is, how Ollie mimicked Phil and scared the fuck out of Andy. So after the fall, Andy wakes up in the hospital where he quickly starts to panic and fight the doctors, 100% believing he has to get to Piper as fast as possible in order to save her, which is only made worse by the fact that it is now pouring rain outside. And remember, Zombie Phil, aka Demonic Ollie, warned him Piper would die in the rain. And it is at this point in the movie where we have seen water come into play a ton, especially in any scenes that surround death. And the reason why that is because in this supernatural universe that the Philippou Brothers have created, water is an omen for death, which we also saw in Talk to Me.
Yeah, which is very interesting because in the Catholic world and a lot of religions, water is used for cleansing, and it's the rebirth and cleansing, being baptized, and they really took water and flipped it on its head.
Went the other way with it.
Yeah, use it as a death and suffering and trauma, despair, and it is very, very clear in this movie that it is used fantastically.
Yeah, if you actually, because I started thinking about Talk to Me once I discovered this, and same thing in that movie. I'm going to talk a little bit about this universe that they've created here in a little bit, but they clearly have a set of rules that every movie's following. So while Andy is forced to stay in the hospital and recover by himself, we then cut back over to Laura's house where we see she is very happy to finally have Piper to herself, where she begins to kind of mold her into Kathy, which is definitely weird, but kind of tells us that whatever is going on here, whatever crazy supernatural shit Laura is up to, is definitely connected to Kathy's death. So the next day, we see Laura come visit Andy at the hospital, but it's pretty clear from the start that she means business. And the first clue we get that tells us that is the fact that she didn't even bring Piper to see her own brother. And after Andy asked about his sister, he's shocked to discover she has been left at the house with crazy-ass Ollie. That bit of info mixed with the fact that it's still raining outside puts Andy immediately into panic mode. And now, at first, Laura plays nice here, totally pretending she's here because she cares about him, which causes Andy to put his guard down in order to try and warn Laura about the chilling message from Zombie Phil. But Laura quickly blows this off as just, some kind of PTSD hallucination. And this is where she drops a tiny little nuclear bomb on Andy. So when talking about Piper dying in the rain, she looks at him and tells him that the hallucination stems from the fact that they found their father dead in the shower after she killed him. Laura straight up admits she kills Phil here. I didn't see that fucking coming at all. I totally missed it on my first watch. But it's important to mention here, Andy hears her say this, but when he asks her to repeat it, she plays it off like he, misheard her because of this head injury. Now, to be fair, there is a lot of debate whether Laura actually killed Phil to get a hold of Piper, or did she just make this up to fuck with Andy even more? And in my personal opinion, I totally believe that she did indeed kill Phil. And here is why I say that. If you think back to the beginning of the film, right after Phil dies, Piper says he had just beat cancer and was in recovery. And this tells us that Phil was most likely not on the verge of death. I would assume that the doctors probably did a full checkup on him in order to declare him officially in remission. So his, sudden death in the shower, while not impossible by any means, is very unlikely, at least from, a data perspective. Now, the question is, if Laura did manage to kill Phil, how did she do it without leaving any traces and never physically being in the house? Well, I think I have an answer to that question. There is a promotional ARG website for this movie named blackangeltapes.net, which is essentially a dark website that appears to run auctions on real supernatural items that are used by this global network of supernatural occultists. And that is according to Daniel Philippou. He was, talking about this when he, was talking about the shared universe that all of their movies are going to have. And we know for a fact, thanks to the comment section of this website, that this is where Laura bought the tape. She was actually told about it by a local psychic. One of the coolest things about this site is you can actually look through and read all of the other listings, with one of them even being the hand from Talk to Me. But after reading through them all, I discovered one item that would be perfect for killing somebody supernaturally without leaving any connection to you. And that item is a voodoo doll labeled a cursed item, which claims to be powered by a trapped soul. And to back this up a little more, the product description says, quote, "Hurt who you want to hurt, make them squirm, comes with instructions, make good offer, get it quick." The photo of the doll itself actually shows 5 or 6 needles stabbed into the chest of the doll. Now, I don't have any proof Laura ordered this thing and used it to kill Phil, but I did see in the comment section of that item that the item was indeed sold. And considering we know she's already bought the tape from this site, not to mention, Kathy was a blind 13-year-old girl. How many blind 13-year-olds with a single parent that has cancer and pretty much no family to take her in if that parent dies are living in this area? Most likely Piper is the only one that fits that description. So either Laura got extremely lucky when Phil just suddenly dropped dead, or Laura used black magic to target and kill Phil in order to get the perfect replacement body for her soon-to-return daughter. I rest my case.
I disagree.
Oh.
I go on the other side because I did hear a little bit about that theory, and it's very interesting with the
I never found
with
that
the
theory. I put that
auction
one together.
site, and I do remember going through a bunch of the stuff on the auction site and seeing the doll on there. But if you're building a dark web auction site, a voodoo doll that you can hurt and kill somebody with is definitely going to be one of the first 10 things you think of to put on there. So I think that Laura said this purposely, obviously, to fuck with him because this is part of making Andy think that he's going crazy. He is convinced at this point. He just went, got in the shower, and seen his dead dad, which we know Laura fed the hair to Ollie, which was just so fucked up to think that she knew he was going to have to get in the shower after being covered in
Mhm.
blood and immediately does that to send his dead dad essentially in there to scare the fuck out of him. But now she said that essentially to make him think that he's gone crazy even more so than he already does. I think that she is way too calculated to have a mistake like this. Like, she has been so on point to flat out come out and say that she killed his dad would be just a crazy mistake
I
to
don't
make.
I don't think
But
she makes
but
a mistake.
what makes me really think that that is not the case. I don't think that she necessarily I think she told the social services, we find out later on they know her
Mhm.
and they know her daughter was blind. So as soon as this blind girl comes in there around this age, the first person they're going to call is her. If she's looking to adopt, which clearly she is, or foster. But yeah, I don't think she necessarily had to have a blind girl in that spot. I think the fit is so perfect. We see coming up here that it almost makes her abandon everything. The fit was so perfect. And that would not be the case if she had went as far as to killing this girl's dad. But my main feelings for why I don't think that she killed the dad is she is so unexperienced, just not very inclined with this entire ritual stuff. Like, she has no idea the timeline, what's supposed to work, when stuff's supposed to happen.
Well, the voodoo doll
She like
comes with instructions.
she literally asked the kid in the shower, like, "How am I supposed to know if this is working, if I can't see you?" Like, she has no idea exactly how this is gonna work or the timeline, how things are gonna play out. So for her to go that far ahead and somehow find out about this blind girl that doesn't have any family, which wouldn't be something social services would be able to just look at. They don't have like a file on everybody before your parent dies. She would have to have discovered this girl somehow, tracked down, researched her family, killed their dad. I think the dad did die due to his cancer. We had a family member a couple years back that survived cancer, got 4 times a year checkups, had just recently gone through a checkup, and then they found that the cancer was back and it was stage 4 at that point, right after a checkup, and they had missed it. And within a month, she was gone. So these things do happen all the time. I just my opinion, I think Laura is not well versed enough to put that whole plan into place and it come out this good. I think she's just out of she's just struggling. She's so mentally collapsing and can't let go of her daughter that she's panicking and she's ordered these tapes and studied them and she has no idea if this shit's gonna even work.
Well, we remain on opposite sides of the fence. So, after visiting with Andy for a bit, Laura tells him not to worry, that she will watch Piper very closely and not allow her to go outside while it's raining, if that makes him feel any better. But we then cut back to the house where we immediately see Laura breaking that promise as she grabs Piper's hand to take her outside to play in the rain. And if you pay close attention here, you will notice that this is the only time in the whole movie where we truly see Laura happy and free from her pain. And the reason why is because she is getting closer and closer to getting her daughter back. Not to mention, in her mind, she has already started associating Piper with her memories and love for Kathy. Now, how is she planning to pull this off? We still don't know, but we do know that Laura is definitely involved with some kind of black magic shit, which obviously stems from this demon possessing Ollie. Ollie is definitely just like some random boy who got wrapped up in this. Andy's love for his sister has the potential to fuck this plan up, which is kind of why Laura is trying to get rid of him. But this all revolves around the sudden death of Kathy. So, needless to say, we have a lot of information, but we still don't have all the pieces of the puzzle yet. But after they play in the rain, we get another really important clue as to what is going on here, where we then see Laura invite Piper into the shed by the pool, where she gives her Kathy's favorite sweater and then reveals what she's been keeping locked up out there in an old freezer. And because Piper is blind, she is actually spared the depravity of what is actually sitting there in front of her. But she does reach out and touch it, where we finally see Laura has been keeping the rotting, frozen dead body of her daughter Kathy and allowing Ollie to eat bits of the flesh as part of this ritual. Very dark, wasn't really expecting her to literally be keeping a body in the shed out back, but that is what's happening. So after that big reveal, we then cut to a very angry Laura who just had to go pick up Andy after the doctor suddenly released him from the hospital. And of course, this is, it fucks up Laura's plan, which it turns out is very time sensitive. She then claims Andy has had a psychotic break and is dangerous to have at the house with her and the 2 kids, but considering everything he has been through in the past few days, plus he notices it's still pouring rain, he just kind of ignores her bitching, escaping to his room to pump some iron. But after chugging down another protein shake, he seems to be getting more and more agitated, which is only amplified by the memories of his father spending quality time with Piper while he's left in the house alone. So obviously, Laura has put something in this, this powder that he's been drinking, which is making him agitated and aggressive because she needs to find a way to get him out of the house ASAP so she has the time to do the ritual.
I think it's some sort of like testosterone booster or something.
Yeah.
She's trying to get him to snap.
Yeah. So later that night, we see while everyone is in bed, Laura brings Ollie to her room, sits him down in front of the TV, and starts the tape, which instantly catches the demon's attention, leaving him glued to the TV screen as Laura draws a counterclockwise circle on his head with her finger. And as the camera changes angles, quickly focusing on what is playing on the TV, we see the possessed Russian woman literally eating a dead person's face, where she then crawls over to the other dead woman and begins puking all of that chewed up flesh and blood into the lady's mouth. And after a few seconds of this, the demonic looking woman sits back and watches when suddenly the dead woman comes back to life, immediately grasping for air. So this is obviously extremely important to the story. What we are seeing here is the final stage of the ritual, which Laura plans on using to bring back her daughter, which would effectively place Kathy's soul into Piper's body, forcing Piper out. So let's talk about this ritual real quick. Now, you remember how I said earlier that this movie and Talk to Me were, they're written at the same time, and even at one point they swapped characters? Well, while that was going on, the Philippou Brothers were also doing some serious world building, which included writing detailed spell books, coming up with whole entire cult backstories, and creating tons of specific lore that barely makes its way onto the screen in either film. And the reason they did this was because they planned on every horror movie they make, it would be a part of this fictional world that they created that features this global network of supernatural occultists that I mentioned earlier. And because they've already had all this stuff thought out, whenever they get a new idea for a story, they already have the foundation and, the details and all that stuff. And according to this world that they built, there are rules for how this particular ritual has to work, and these are the rules. So number 1 is called the vessel. So first you must summon the dark angel, aka this demon named Tari, and place him into a human host where he prepares by fasting as you set, everything else up. Number 2 is called the consumption, which is where the possessed host falls into extreme hunger, causing it to devour the body of the dead person you want to bring back. Now, the really important part about this is you only have a few months after the person dies to start this ritual. The reason why is because the soul actually remains in the body after death for only those few months, which is why Laura needs to get rid of Andy ASAP. She's running out of time. And finally, rule number 3 is called the soul transfer, which is where the third living person is brought in to be sacrificed, and they must die or be killed in the same way that the person you're trying to bring back was. The possessed person then begins to eat the flesh of the dead person you're trying to bring back, and after eating as much of it as they can fit in the stomach, they then puke it into the mouth of the now deceased sacrifice. This final step permanently erases the sacrificed person's soul, allowing the original dead person's soul to be fully transferred into their new body. And once that happens, the ritual is complete, and the demon named Tari heads back to hell until the next one. If you're really interested in this, you can visit the website I was talking about, find the tapes. You can actually read Laura's comments under the post where she keeps asking questions about, how to do this and how to do that. And she actually talks about some of the events we see in the movie. It's blackangeltapes.net.
Yeah. Also, with the rules you just laid out there, that tells us that in the found footage tapes that the person they're reviving, that girl clearly hung herself.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
you're correct.
We see them killing the victim, the vessel. They are forcibly hanging her in the same exact spot where the girl obviously had committed suicide.
Interesting story, and I do believe the Philippou brothers have wrote that story. They wrote they came up with so much stuff that they couldn't even possibly fit into this, but it was essentially they just added it to the world building, and maybe it'll pop back up later. Who knows? So yeah, now we finally know what the hell Laura has been up to this whole time. And as she watches the last part of the ritual on this tape, she realizes she's almost out of time and needs to get rid of Andy tomorrow. And because she is so desperate at this point, she figures it is time to finally give Andy that one last final push over the edge. And how is she going to do that, you might ask? She's going to resort to violence. So early that next morning, just before the sun comes up, she sprays herself down with Andy's body spray, sneaks into Piper's room where she is fast asleep, and punches the fuck out of her right in the eye, which immediately wakes Piper up in severe pain and confusion, wondering what the fuck just happened.
This shit fucking threw me for a loop.
Yeah. We then cut to a few hours later where Andy once again wakes up late in a puddle of his own drool, only to immediately be confronted by both Laura and Piper, accusing him of being the one who punched his sister. And it's important to note that the reason why Piper is accusing Andy is because she smelled his body spray after the assault. Now, Andy is completely shocked and confused by this accusation, knowing he would never hurt Piper, and instead believes that it was either Laura or Ollie, but his argument gets shot down pretty quickly after Piper tells him that she could smell him and his body spray when she got hit. Laura quickly jumps in here, calling Andy abusive and even spilling the beans about Phil abusing him his whole life and hitting Piper in the face when he was 8 years old, which she then makes even worse when she accuses him of being so angry about the abuse, he refused to try and save his dad that day in the bathroom, which causes Piper to completely change her outlook on her brother. But before Andy can explain himself to Piper, Laura cuts him off by getting in his face and calling him violent and aggressive, blaming it on steroids, which he's not taking steroids, he's taking creatine, but she's just trying to piss him off. But yeah, at first, Andy tries to keep his cool and calm Laura down, but she just, comes at him harder and harder until he finally snaps, which occurs after she snatches his phone away while trying to snap a picture of a rough-looking Ollie standing outside, where she then smashes it on the floor. And during this tussle over the phone, Andy tries to snatch his arm away from Laura, causing Laura, with tons of exaggeration, to slam herself on the floor, pretending that Andy just assaulted her, which causes Piper to freak out. This just keeps getting worse and worse until finally she yells at him to stay away from Piper, proclaiming that she is now her protector, which leads to Andy responding by saying, "Yeah, like you protected Kathy." That's a mic drop.
Damn.
This enrages Laura, where we then see her full-blown attack Andy until he finally explodes like a volcano, slamming her against a wall and punching a fist-sized hole right next to her head, which is exactly what she wanted to happen. Because not only does she have Piper to back her up, with the authorities, but she also now has a fist-sized hole in her wall from Andy's temper. That way she can say, "I was right all along."
Yeah, this is major because Piper is still on Andy's side up until this point. When she's celebrating when Andy's in the hospital, she takes Piper into the shed and she is I think going to potentially back out of killing her and doing the ritual. She starts doing her hair, like her daughter. She asks if she would be willing to stay with her
Yeah.
and live with her and call her mom, which ends up being very important at the end. And Piper says, "No, I was really looking forward to getting a place with Andy, but we'll still visit you on the weekends." And she even opens up the freezer, and when Piper starts to get kind of worried, what is she touching? She says, "Oh, it's nothing. It's just a piece of meat." And that's when she's saying, like, this thing that is her daughter is no longer her daughter. It's just the vessel that used to carry her daughter, that she is going to go through with it, and that makes up her mind right
Yep.
there. But that whole scene tells us that Piper was still on Andy's side, and this whole scene was masterfully done by Laura. Super evil, but yeah, definitely wins Piper over.
So once Andy realizes he just went too far, he takes off in his car, heading straight to the Child Protective Services office to talk to Wendy, totally prepared to tell her about all the fucked up shit Laura has been doing. But his plan falls flat right out the gate when Wendy says that she finds this all hard to believe, considering that she has known Laura for over 20 years after working together here at the Child Protective Services, which explains how Laura was able to find out about Andy's past assault on his sister, possibly Piper's medical condition, and how to manipulate the foster system in order to get Piper into her house. That part is a theory, but it can add to that.
It definitely explains why they put so much trust in her. She was their best counselor.
Yeah, and she's
Like,
only been gone like 3 months.
yeah, she totally has the foster system on her side.
Mhm.
Um, Also, like there's a two major reveals back to back right before this. Andy finds a missing person poster that looks a lot like Ollie, identical to Ollie, and he puts two and two together and realizes that Ollie was kidnapped. This is why when he gets outside the circle, he says, "Help me." But the big tell here was that you remember whenever he right before he bites down on that knife, he hands Ollie a pen and a piece of paper to communicate. And after all the commotion, when he's having his panic attack, he finds the paper and sees the word bird written on it. It's the only thing that's written on it's bird. Well, Ollie's real last name is Bird. And this tells us something huge. And it is that despite the possession and this kid not having any control, he is still inside there and has some awareness, at least enough where he was able to write his last name down before biting down on that knife.
Yeah, it
And it was almost like the demon caused him to bite down on this knife to shut him up.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that. That's a good point. This did remind me, because this is actually the first time I've watched this movie after watching Obsession. And we do see something similar there too, where the real her is there, but she can only, gain control a few times. But anyway, yeah, so once Wendy tells him this, he realizes the whole, like, he said, she said thing isn't gonna work in his favor here. But he does have one last wild card in his back pocket, which he is about to play. And this is indeed the missing persons flyer that tells him that Ollie is really a young boy named Connor Bird. And once Andy starts thinking about this, he remembers the crumpled up piece of paper, and or this prompts him to tell Wendy that the missing child has been at Laura's house this whole time. And this is just enough evidence to get Wendy to agree to go over there with him and see if this is true.
Well, I think the reason being too is because Wendy knows that Laura doesn't have any other foster children.
Well,
So
Laura's slick because she tells everybody that his name is Ollie, because her nephew's name is Ollie. That's
Yeah.
why he's got the
Yeah.
red. And Wendy's
Mhm.
like, yeah, there is an Ollie in her family. He's got red curly hair, and this is a picture of him. And he's like, that ain't the fucking kid I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So she tried to cover that up, but it failed.
Yeah, and then he's like, "No, this is like she's using this as a guise as this was another foster kid who went through this traumatic event."
Yeah.
And it's enough to get Wendy to be like, "Okay, let me go over there and see what the fuck's going on."
So we then cut to Laura dropping Piper off at, whatever sport she plays. But upon returning home, she discovers that Ollie has torn her house apart, eating everything he can get his hands on, including non edible items. He also looks super possessed here, meaning Laura is almost out of time to finish the ritual. But before she can really figure out what to do, Ollie attacks her, biting a massive chunk out of her arm. One really cool detail I just noticed this time around is after he bites her, he actually starts screaming at her in her own voice through the door.
Yeah.
That was fucking cool.
Yeah, that's something that is really hard to pick up
I
on.
didn't pick up on it, yeah.
Never noticed it the first time I watched it, but it's so awesome when you know that the demon can
Yeah.
mimic whatever the last thing it ate, and it's screaming at her.
Yeah, and then we also get a fucking gnarly table biting scene right after this. If you've seen this movie even one time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We also see him literally like ripping fucking chunks of his own skin off and like chewing pieces of it up. Like it looks fucking crazy.
Dude, the table biting scene was the number one thing I remembered from the
Yeah.
first time
Yeah.
in the theaters. It is the first thing I thought about when I thought about this movie was how fucking much it made me cringe in my seat. And then the skin, peeling the skin up and eating like parts of himself. It, as the physical effects are not like a massive part of this movie, but they are for Ollie and his character and his downfall. And as he gets more and more gross and possessed throughout the movie. And by this point, he looks fucking awesome. These physical effects or practical effects were some of the best, I think, of all of 2025. They were super, super cringy, and I found out that the, Philippou Brothers actually had 2 special effects teams kinda duke it out to see who could come up with the grossest shit for
Oh,
these
cool.
scenes,
Cool.
and it paid off, obviously.
Yeah, I know that the knife biting scene and the table biting scene were done the same way, which is they had a custom set of like a mouth appliance, like dentures made, and the dentist added breakaway teeth in there to basically make it look cool. And according to the special effects supervisor, this set of dentures protected the vast majority of the actor's mouth, so they said that he could really go to town and he wouldn't hardly feel it.
Yeah, I guess they had, both special effects teams do all the major effects, and then they just selected which
Yeah.
ones looked the best.
So after that, we then cut to Andy and Wendy driving over to Laura's, who, by the way, doesn't know they're coming. But we then see Andy borrow Wendy's phone so he can call Piper. But unfortunately, she doesn't answer, forcing him to leave an emotional voicemail. And this is where he lays it all out for her. The abuse from their father, how it was intentionally hidden from her all these years, how he hit her when he was 8 years old, and even how resentful he was over how their father treated her compared to him. But he also explains, with tears streaming down his face, how much he loves her, how thankful he is for their close bond, and most importantly, how he knows he wasn't the one who punched her because he would never hurt her in any way. And after he finishes up, he then tries to warn her about Laura and how dangerous she is, explaining that she made all of that stuff up in order to drive a wedge between them, which is exactly what happened. And it becomes very clear here that Andy is heartbroken.
Yeah, this was, I think, the only mistake that Andy really makes on his own throughout this movie is him not knowing Laura well enough to know that she would be ahead of the curve and she would have Piper's phone,
Mhm.
and there's no way that she would allow him, after storming out, to have open contact with her, and this is what tips Laura off to know that Wendy's on the way to the house.
Yeah, so we cut over to Laura, who has Piper's phone for some reason, and we see that she's listening to Andy's voicemail. And right before Andy ends the call, the recording manages to pick up Wendy telling Andy she's going to fix this, which tips off Laura that they're on the way, leading us to a cleaning montage. Once they arrive, Wendy tells Andy to stay in the car while she heads inside to talk to Laura and look for any signs of Connor Bird. But of course, Andy doesn't listen, opting to instead sneak into the backyard and see what the fuck is in that shed. And at first, everything seems perfectly normal to Wendy. The house is clean, everything's in, decent order. Laura isn't acting strange in any way, and there's absolutely no sign of Connor Bird. And the reason why Ollie is currently nowhere to be found is because after Andy breaks into the shed, we see that Ollie is locked in there eating the decomposing face of Kathy's remains. And when Andy stumbles into this horrific scene, Ollie looks up at him with solid red eyes, blood smeared all over him, and chunks of gray flesh stuck to his mouth. This obviously scares the fuck out of Andy, prompting him to take off running towards the house to get Wendy. We then cut to inside the house where we see Wendy beginning to get concerned after noticing Laura is badly bleeding from her arm. That, plus the sudden sounds of Andy's screams coming from the backyard, quickly ignite a struggle between her and Laura, which leads to Laura briefly explaining that she's trying to bring Kathy back to life, begging her friend of 20 years to please not get in her way or try to stop her.
This is Laura fully coming undone.
Yes.
Like, this is her. She has broke. She knows that she's been caught, and her last-ditch effort is she is going to convince this woman that to let me kill this girl and let me kill this kid I kidnapped to bring my daughter back, thinking that there is a chance that this other woman that she worked with in foster care
We'll have sympathy for her and
will say okay.
let her do it.
Yeah.
But Wendy finally realizes that Andy was indeed telling the truth about Laura. And she decides to run out to the shed where Andy shows her the missing child, Connor Bird, who is currently eating the face of a dead little girl. And I think it's safe to say, Wendy's seen enough at this point, grabbing Andy and rushing back to her car to call for help. But before they make it, they are suddenly run over by Laura, with Wendy getting smashed between the two vehicles and dying instantly, and Andy getting hit and thrown a few feet away, landing face first in the driveway. Now, Andy, despite being badly hurt, is still alive. But all that's about to change as we then see Laura walk over to him and press his face down into a puddle, killing him after a few minutes of struggling. This is a very sad death. Andy deserved so much better. If I could have picked anybody to survive this movie, it would have been Andy because he had such a shitty hand in life. And I hate that that's the end for him.
And he was trying to do something so right.
Yes.
Which was take care of his sister who was blind. And this whole fight, he could have just left and said, I'll wait the 3 months. But he knew that she was in danger and he was going to fight with his life to try to save her. And man, the truck coming out of nowhere and hitting Wendy and him was, I will say, awesome. It fucking has literally reminded me of Hereditary with the decapitation scene. It literally took me by complete surprise. They did a really awesome thing where Wendy is standing at the stair banister with Laura right behind her, and you're like, Laura's gonna push her over the stairs. She gets away. Then they do another thing in the shed where Laura's gonna get her while she's in the shed. And they do 3 different fake outs, only to have this car just out of nowhere, when you don't see it coming, just blast them. And then Andy dying is like, in a horror movie, when you can have a character as main as Andy was, he was he's the main character of the movie. When you kill them off, it adds a element of horror that nobody is safe. that anybody can die in this movie.
There's also the weird psychological effect that it has where you get this young, strapping, essentially 18-year-old boy who dies in an inch of water.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, wow, he is brought to the end of his life because of a tiny amount of water.
Well, and it's water.
Yeah.
Water being in this movie it's representative of death, trauma, grief, and everybody who's died has had some type of water association in this movie, and it's almost as if he had to die. They could have left it where he died from the car
Yeah.
hit, and they purposely put that she would come up, and while he was clearly paralyzed and couldn't move, she literally takes his head and holds his face under the water, which is just such a grueling, just I don't know why that is so just brutal to have somebody hold somebody who's hurt and fighting for their sister and just hold their head under an inch of water and drown them while they can't fight back. But it's just so fucking scary.
Yeah, I agree. So after Laura kills Wendy and Andy, she hides the wreckage and the bodies and then goes to pick up Piper from her sports thing. And after arriving home, Piper is shocked to hear the sound of her brother's voice calling from the back room. Obviously, there is no way it could really be Andy, which means Ollie must have eaten a piece of Andy's body in order to mimic his voice, which is exactly what happened here. Because next we see Piper discover a lifeless body in the back room, who she quickly identifies as her brother after feeling the braces in his mouth. And it's at this point where Piper realizes Andy was right about Laura and she is now not only alone, but in serious danger.
Yeah, so this also makes me think that the little bit of Connor that's still in there called her up those stairs because Connor knows at this point, or Ollie, I should say, the little bit of Ollie, Oliver, that's still in there, he knows that she identifies people and feels their face, and that she was gonna feel his face and his head, and she in turn asked what color his hair is. That's how she finds out when Laura lies, says his hair's red. He's got, curly red hair. That's what really tips her off, causes her to run in there, and she finds her brother dead. But it makes me wonder, was that Connor Bird, what was left of him,
Good point.
calling her up there?
Yeah.
There's no
Trying to warn her.
there's no reason the demon would have called her up there.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
makes no sense.
So this, of course, leads to a long, hard-fought struggle between Piper and Laura, with Laura hell-bent on completing the ritual and getting her daughter back. Now, despite Piper's obvious disadvantage, she does manage to fight off Laura and escape, but while running through the living room, she slips on Wendy's blood, which causes her to fall hard, hitting her head and knocking her out. And this gives Laura the chance to drag the young girl's body out to the pool, where she plans on drowning her. Because remember, Kathy died in the pool and they have to die the same way.
In the same spot.
Yeah, so once she kills her, all she's got left to do is let Ollie puke Kathy's flesh into her mouth, and boom, she's got her daughter back. But it doesn't quite play out like that, because while Laura is attempting to hold Piper's head under the water, Piper comes to and immediately starts struggling and fighting to get away. During this final confrontation with Laura, Piper remembers something very important. She thinks back to her conversation in the shed, where Laura told her that she would give anything to hear Kathy call her mom one more time. And right after this, she then tries to convince Piper to start calling her mom. Now, of course, at the time, Piper said no, she wasn't comfortable with that. But Piper realizes here that the emotional connection with Laura and her dead daughter is so strong that maybe the only way to get through to her is to pretend to be Kathy calling out to her mom to stop. And this works, because the moment Laura hears this, she freezes and immediately begins recalling the memory of the day she found Kathy's body in the pool. And this emotionally destroys Laura to the point where she can't even physically stop Piper from swimming away and running for help.
You gotta think Laura, too, doesn't know how this ritual exactly works. Like, she's doing this off the fly watching
Yeah.
videos. So, for right in the middle of the climax of the ritual, for her to pop out and say, call her mom, would cause her to freeze.
Yeah. So she's then left standing there, chest deep in the pool of water while it is pouring rain, hysterically crying from the still lingering heartbreak of losing her daughter all over again. And it's at this point where Laura realizes she just can't go on living with the grief anymore and decides to rip open the wound on her arm from where Ollie bit her and let it bleed out while holding what is left of her real daughter's body. We then cut to Piper, who is attempting to navigate the backyard to escape, but right as she makes her way out of the back gate, she is attacked by a very possessed Ollie, who is currently completely consumed and controlled by an extreme hunger for anything he can eat, especially blind little girls. Piper pretty quickly manages to fight him off just long enough to trip and fall down a hill, which leads directly down to the road. And once Ollie watches Piper get further and further away, the demon realizes it's over. There isn't enough time to complete the ritual at this point, so he begins to loosen his grip over Connor Bird, allowing Connor to walk himself past that white boundary line, which immediately begins expelling the dark angel known as Tari from Connor's body, finally freeing him from this fucking nightmare.
So, what ends up stopping Ollie is whenever he sees the missing persons poster. And this is what little bit that is left inside of Connor Bird sees his own missing persons poster, and he has enough control to stop the demon, stop his body. And if you remember, it's a really quick shot, but when Andy jumps out the car to run to the backyard to save his sister, the poster flies out of the car.
Yeah.
And that is essentially what stops Connor Bird's possessed body, Ollie.
Saves Piper.
Essentially meaning Andy does, in a way, save Piper in the end. It's what saves Piper from being eaten by this demon.
Good catch, because actually I remember seeing the paper fly out, but I kind of never thought about it after that.
Yeah, that was his way of saving her. Or not his way, but it ended up coming full circle, and he does end up saving Piper's life.
His actions do cause her to live.
It also saves Connor, because it's enough for Connor to get enough control over himself to force himself to cross that line.
So right as this is happening, we see Piper flagging down a car in the middle of the road, who quickly run to her aid and called the authorities to report what happened. And Laura is currently bleeding out in the pool. And right as the cops show up, we see a very sad and traumatized Piper sitting in the back of a car, finally listening to Andy's emotional last voicemail, which he ends by saying, "I love you, grapefruit." And the moment he ends the call, Piper hears an airplane fly overhead, which is a callback to what Andy told her to make her feel better after Phil died. And she takes this as Andy isn't just dead and gone. He has boarded a plane and headed towards the afterlife where he can finally get the peace and happiness he has always wanted. We then cut to the cops surrounding Laura's home, where they pretty quickly stumble upon Connor, who is now laying in the woods far away from the house, bleeding out from all over. But he is indeed still alive and also finally free of the possession, as we then see the cops urgently begin performing first aid. After Connor and Piper are saved, we get our final shot of the movie, which is hands down the most emotional and the most beautiful shot of the movie, in my opinion, which is an above shot of the pool that slowly starts to zoom back out, revealing a now peaceful looking Laura floating there with her arms wrapped around the decomposing corpse of Kathy as she slowly bleeds to death. And right before the screen fades to black, we start to catch glimpses of the police officers surrounding the pool, shocked by the sight of Laura in a very dead-looking little girl. And that is the end of Bring Her Back.
Yeah, so this last shot, as beautiful as it is the first shot in which all 3 of these symbolic images used throughout the movie are in one shot.
Yep.
So, with water clearly symbolizing death and trauma, the circle symbolizing the shape used to lure and contain the evil entity that is used in the ritual. And I did find out the triangle because she has a triangle tattooed on her hand. I thought
Yeah.
that this was tied to the cult, but after much digging, I found out that, and this was uh, clarified by one of the Philippou brothers, that um, she is a, Libra, and the Libra sign, zodiac sign, is that little triangle, and it represents air, and she is very much into this. She gets it tattooed on her hand. She has her, pool designed in a triangle, and it is, very fitting because air is the opposite of water. But essentially, it's the first shot to bring all these elements together, and this symbolizes Laura and her trauma perfectly, as she is now the entity that is trapped inside the circle under the pool, being held there by her trauma, aka her dead daughter that she literally physically can't let go of, as she's floating in the middle of this circle.
Yeah, that's good. I did not know that, and I assumed, like, my theory on the triangle, because I didn't ever find anything about it, but I assumed, triangle, 3 points, 3 main characters of the movie. The pool is, we see, inside the circle, the 3 characters inside the circle. So I
Yeah.
thought it was something like that, but that actually makes probably more sense.
Yeah, the triangle is by far the hardest
Yeah.
symbol to find. I ended up finding it on a YouTuber. Can't credit her name, but
Mm,
she actually got an interview with the Philippou brothers. I think she knows them through
mm,
the YouTube circle, and through her own frustrations of trying to figure out
yeah.
what the triangle was, she actually reached out to them. They said she's a Libra. She's very much into, prior to all this happening, her backstory, she's very much into the zodiac signs, and her sign being air. And this is why she has her pool designed in a triangle. She has it tattooed on her hand, but it's very fitting because air is the opposite of water.
All right, so I only got one fact. This episode's already long enough as it is, but this is an important one. So Michael Philippou revealed that they considered a few different endings, and as a matter of fact, this ending that we just saw wasn't the original ending from the script, and this was only changed after a real life tragedy happened to the two brothers while they were filming the movie. One of the endings was where the soul of Kathy actually does end up in Piper's body, effectively killing Piper and reuniting Laura and her daughter. I do believe that is the ending they plan to go with. But a bigger, scarier finale was actually planned out as well, but this was eventually scrapped when their childhood friend suddenly died, which left the brothers thinking that they should switch it up and actually finish the film on a more emotional tone and not necessarily a horror, like, horror movie type ending. Uh, Danny had this to say about this change. Quote, "Death is really unfair and it's really sudden. People don't get resolution. Harley died at the age of 22 or 23. His story wasn't finished yet. The film's new ending goes against what we had originally planned, at least a little bit, but it feels more true to life." And this is also why you see that dedication to Harley Wallace at the end of the movie. It was this guy's death that essentially caused them to change the ending of the movie entirely.
I wonder if Andy's death was different in that big ending that you talk about, because you don't think he's gonna die. Like, you
No.
think if anybody's safe, it's Andy. Even if he comes up short with his sister, it's gonna be a burden he's gonna have to live with. It's gonna be a very dreadful, dark ending. And it is a dreadful, dark ending, but I think the ending was perfect. The shot of how they tied all the symbols together and, it symbolizing Laura being the entity, the evil entity that's now trapped inside of her own grief, inside of the circle. Like she can't leave the circle because she can't leave her dead daughter, who's physically in the pool with her, and she's literally clenching onto her dead body. Is just so fitting. Like
Yeah,
it couldn't have been written any better.
it's a good ending. I agree. All right, so ratings and kill count. So we have a total of 5 kills in this movie. Number 1 is the Russian lady in the VHS who was hung by this cult who claims to not be a cult. Number 2 is Phil, who either died from cancer or was killed by Laura. Number 3, Wendy, who was run over by the car driven by Laura. Number 4 is Andy, who was run over and drowned by Laura. And finally, number 5 is Laura herself, who ripped open her wound to bleed to death. Um, Favorite kill, you're up.
I went with the social worker as it was super surprising and fucking mega brutal. I knew she was gonna be killed, but they trick you out over
Yeah.
and over again, and it comes out of fucking nowhere and absolutely obliterates her body, and then we do get a shot of her face when she's rolled over,
Yeah.
like a scene
It's
or
just
2 later,
destroyed.
and it's so fucked up. It's so fucked up, I can't tell if Ollie was eating on it or if
Yeah.
it just got that fucked up in the wreck. The second is really hard 'cause not a ton of other people died in this movie. I went with the dad because he treated Andy like shit, and his dead body looked just absolutely horrifying.
So I also went with Wendy as my number 1. It was sudden and shocking, and then I agree, this quick scene we see a little bit later on of her actual, like, fucked up body looks great. My number 2 was actually the Russian lady in the VHS movie when they're hanging her,
Yeah,
'cause it's VHS and it looks real and it's fucking creepy, man. It looks like a snuff tape.
I didn't even think about the VHS tapes. Like,
Mm.
I didn't consider the death and them murdering her essentially
It's in the
for
very
yeah,
beginning.
they forcibly hang her,
Yeah.
and it's really fucked up.
Mhm.
Another thing too, is I would have picked Laura because of the way that she kills herself. Essentially, she rips her. I believe it's your radial artery, but it's
Yes.
the ones that run through your lower arms, and
Mhm.
she rips that in half and then takes her daughter in the pool. The only thing is we don't ever actually get to see her die, so we don't know if the police got to her and save her before she dies. She is clearly still alive when she's clenching onto her daughter in the pool, so I didn't count her.
Well, I thought about that very thing because you can't tell if she's dead or alive in that last scene, but I do slightly remember from biology school or class that, um, when an artery is hit, I mean, you can bleed out in easily under 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Like, 3 minutes is a long time for an artery bleed out.
yeah.
I don't think that she was alive any longer much after, Piper escapes. I think she's dead in that last shot, but
Yeah, we also don't get to know, like, did she correctly rip it? Like, did she get it
yeah,
all the way? Like,
yeah.
we don't get we don't know if, like, her heart beating and dragging her daughter would have definitely sped that process up, but we know of, like, veterans that have had limbs blown off and survived and way, way crazier circumstances.
Tourniquets.
Uh, Also the water
Yeah.
may have made a difference, with water pressure pressing on a wound. I don't know if it would bleed out slower. I have no ideas, but I just didn't count it because I just didn't know.
Alright, on to film rating. What do you got?
So I gave this a 4.8. This is almost a near perfect movie for me. It's an absolute banger on every level. The script was amazing, absolutely genius. It highlights grief and trauma like almost no other movie. It's one of those movies on the second watch, it's even better because you realize every little thing has a meaning, which is a testament to the Philippou Brothers. The art department was amazing, from the set designs, the symbolism, the wardrobe department telling a story, even down to, like, if you look, she has her daughter's fingernail polish on, and it slowly deteriorates throughout the film. And it doesn't say it's her daughter's fingernail polish, it's clearly like a glittery little kid's fingernail polish. So they almost tell a story, and we talked about the clothes. They almost tell a story through that. That was extremely genius. Cinematography was amazing. The sound design, the tone and atmosphere were really dark and effective. The acting was absolutely phenomenal, highlighted by the amazing performance of Sally Hawkins playing Laura. And then the shining star of this for me, through a lot of shining stars, was the special effects that we did get. God, do they make you fucking feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, they're really good. I gave the movie a 4.4. It's sad, it's emotional, very well written. The characters feel very authentic and real to me. Honestly, the acting was phenomenal, especially between the 4 leads. Um, Not to mention, they all have really good chemistry with each other. Huge props to Sally Hawkins, Billy Barrett, Sora Wong, and then there's the one that everyone forgets about, which is Jonah Wren Phillips, who played
Yeah.
Ollie. He did an amazing job, and out of all the reviews that I read, not a single one mentioned him.
Yeah, and it's kinda crazy, and I left him out in the beginning, because you don't really think of him. It's a possession movie. He's the one that's possessed, and he
Yeah,
gets left out a lot, but
yeah,
I don't think there's anything that he could have done to play his character better.
yeah, agree. The effects are 10 out of 10 here. We don't get like a ton of blood and gore, but we get plenty considering the type of movie it is. The possession stuff looked 100% practical to me, which is how it should be done. Honestly, I like the movie so much more after diving into it like this, but the biggest thing for me was finding out about the shared universe and world building that the Philippou Brothers have done in order to connect, all these films together. It makes me so much more excited for not only Talk to Me Too, but whatever comes behind that. These guys have a really good idea of what horror fans want and enjoy. They're really good at crafting these stories that manage to hit you from an emotional standpoint while also delivering a visually stunning and horrifying movie. And I think that these guys have a bright future ahead. So, yeah, 4.4 from me.
Yeah, dude, they do dark, grief, trauma-stricken fucking possession so good. Like, they do horror so good. I mean, they practical effects are great. I mean, both the movies that they put out have been bangers. I don't see these guys falling off, if as long as they maintain control over making the movie that
Yeah.
they wanna make, and A24 has allowed them to do that, and hopefully they don't end up at a studio that doesn't. Um, yeah, as long as that happens, man, these guys are on a roll.
Well, that is our coverage on Bring Her Back. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website and check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or your dead zombie dad about the show. And we hope to see you next time.